Get those emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. I also want to say a massive thank you to everybody who's donated to our Poppy appeal for the Royal British Legion. It's justgiving.com/page/GBNews Poppy, justgiving.com/page/GBNews Poppy. So far, you lovely lot have raised more than £160,000, which is a monumental Herculean effort that says a huge amount about the generosity of the British public. Well done, you. And I am pleased to say that the Royal British Legion will be coming on this show to help tell you where your hard-earned money is going to be spent. So that is very nice, isn't it? gbviews@gbnews.com. But right now, it's your headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3:02. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The first group of injured evacuees from Gaza has arrived in Egypt. They were taken across the Rafah border crossing in ambulances under a deal mediated by Qatar. It's unclear how long the border will remain open, but it's unlikely all those waiting will make it through today. Up to 500 foreign passport holders are also expected to cross into Egypt. Local media says the first group has now arrived. James Cleverly says UK teams are ready to assist British nationals as soon as they can leave. The Israeli military now says 15 of its soldiers have been killed during heavy fighting in its ground offensive into Gaza. Israel's bombardment continues. The Israel Defense Forces says it's hit 11,000 Hamas targets so far. The IDF also claims an airstrike yesterday killed a senior Hamas commander it says was a ringleader of the attack on the 7th of October. Palestinian officials say 50 Gazans were killed and another 150 injured in that strike. In other news, the world needs a referee to mediate how companies use emerging technologies. That's according to Elon Musk. The tech entrepreneur's one of the high-profile guests at the world's first summit on AI safety at Bletchley Park. The Prime Minister hopes to put the UK at the centre of global efforts to monitor the technology as well as attract business investment. Those attending agreed to a declaration as a starting point for a global conversation on AI safety.
We're not stronger or faster than other creatures, but we are more intelligent. And here we are for the first time, really in human history, with something that's going to be far more intelligent than us. So it's not clear to me we can actually control such a thing. But I think we can aspire to guide it in a direction that's beneficial to humanity. But I do think it's one of the existential risks that we face, and it's potentially the most pressing one.
Elon Musk, tech entrepreneur, speaking there. A former top civil servant has suggested that hundreds of her colleagues may have breached lockdown rules, including government ministers. Helen McNamara was Deputy Cabinet Secretary in 2020 and 2021 and played a key role in Britain's COVID response. She told the inquiry that rules were routinely broken in the daily course of government and that Boris Johnson displayed a breezy confidence regarding the pandemic, which she found jarring.
It was striking that something that I felt personally was obviously deeply worrying, that there was a sort of de facto assumption that we were going to be great without any of the hesitancy or questioning or that sort of behind closed doors bit of government, which isn't about saying everything's smashing and going brilliantly, but actually being a bit more reflective. The sort of unbelievably bullish, we're going to be great at everything approach is not a smart mentality to have inside a government meeting.
House prices increased by 0.9% in October, which experts say reflects the limited supply of properties on the market. Nationwide's market index shows an increase on last month's figures, though average prices across the UK are down 3.3% compared to last year. The Building Society says market activity remains weak, with the number of mortgages approved in September down 30%. Amber weather warnings are in place for the south coast of England and parts of Pembrokeshire and Wales as Storm Ciaran nears the UK. The Met Office says wind and rain could bring potential risk to life and property. A red wind warning has been issued by Jersey Met, with gusts of almost 100 miles per hour expected. Parts of Northern Ireland have already been flooded due to heavy rainfall, and people have been warned not to travel. Our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie is in Newry in County Down.
The clean-up operation is somewhat delayed due to the overnight rainfall that is still keeping the Clanry River incredibly high. Many businesses still can't be accessed, and the smell of diesel fuel coming from the water is really quite strong. And with more rain forecast, it may be some time before the clean-up operation can begin and businesses can get back to normal.
The King has called for action, partnership and commitment to combat environmental challenges as his state visit to Kenya continues. King Charles told the United Nations office in Nairobi he has seen the effects of climate change firsthand before planting a tree to commemorate his visit. His Majesty then joined Queen Camilla on a visit to an elephant orphanage where the Queen fed a calf. The monarch also visited an urban forest to highlight the importance of green spaces in our cities. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car and digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back over to Patrick.
Our top story this hour, the security and policing challenge in the UK as tensions rise over the Gaza war. We've now had a third mice attack on a McDonald's in Birmingham after a masked gang of pro-Palestine activists hurled rodents at the restaurant in protest at the fast food chain's alleged support for Israel. I know, it is weird, but let's have a look and a listen.
My days. Look at this. They've just dropped these off in McDonald's, all these rats in McDonald's. Oh my days.
That's a lot of rats.
Look at that.
Somebody just took that in?
Yeah. Oh my.
Yeah, like I said, it's the third such attack that we are seeing. If you're listening to us on radio, I mean, it is quite straightforward. Actually, it's a load of mice thrown into a McDonald's, but it followed a similar incident earlier this week where customers were left screaming in shock after what appears to be a pro-Palestine activist unleashing a horde of mice painted red, green, white and black into another Birmingham McDonald's. And last night, commuters at Liverpool Street Station were disrupted by a group of pro-Palestinian activists who staged a sit-in calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Meanwhile, Manchester Police has apologised after its officers removed Israel hostage posters saying they'd, quote, got it wrong. Well, quite a lot to go at here. I know what I'm thinking about this mice stuff, which is for the effort that you've gone to source hundreds of mice and then paint the mice and then drive to a McDonald's and lob them into a McDonald's, maybe you could put that effort into getting a job. But GB News' reporter Jack Carson now joins us from Birmingham, not surrounded by mice, which is good, but why are you there and what's going on?
Well, Patrick, last night this small Heath McDonald's became the third in all of these protests to be hit by these mice protests. It was late into the evening where masked men walked into that McDonald's with a box with mice and seemed to head almost charge towards the counter, as you in the video that's been posted around social media. And they then threw that box of mice on the counter, at staff behind the counter, and of course on the floor around it. Is of course those mice then had to scuttle around, and as they then left with their Palestine flags, shouting phrases such as Free Palestine as well. But it's not, of course, it's not the first McDonald's that has happened, and by the looks of things as well, now that this is spreading around the country, it might not be the last either. Of course, we had reports just half an hour ago of that last night in Keighley in Bradford, a McDonald's there and a Starbucks had also been hit by protests. That McDonald's particularly in Keighley, it's reported that stick insects were in fact thrown at the staff and at the customers in that McDonald's. So this is all part of a boycott from these community campaigners, these pro-Palestine campaigners within the community. They spread these ideas around on social media. And these have now been taking place across the country. They are because they say McDonald's in Israel has been supplying IDF soldiers with free meals. They offer members of different security forces 50% discount in Israel if they come independently to one of their branches. Now, the McDonald's Corporation globally say that that is a franchise decision. That is not the decision of the company overall. But on those attacks last night in Keighley, in Bradford, their MP Robbie Moore has come out on Twitter a few moments ago saying that he was sickened by last night's attacks of vandalism and intimidation, which he says were carried out in his community. They say the smashing of the windows at Keighley Starbucks and McDonald's and the vile attempts to intimidate staff and customers were pathetic, cowardly and disgraceful acts. And just in the last few moments, we have had a statement from West Yorkshire Police who say that the police in Bradford investigating those 3 incidents of criminal damage, that they have arrested a man in his 20s, they say, in relation to one of the incidents, and they say inquiries are ongoing with Bradford District Police. Chief Inspector Paul Wood of Bradford District Police said that they are aware of those videos circulating on social media, and they say that they are understandably distressing to those locally, and they have brought out more officers in that local area to try and reassure the community. Now, it seems to be Birmingham where these mice attacks are happening. Those specific attacks, of course, have not spread elsewhere in the country, but Keighley is a different kind of attack. That attack on that Starbucks, of course, is criminal damage. It's vandalism. That the people in those videos were doing, smashing those glass panes. So that is a different kind of protest. We know in Bristol there was protesters gathered outside the McDonald's, and so there's lots of different community protests that are happening all around the country. As I mentioned, it's not just McDonald's, it's Starbucks and also Disney as well globally, are some of these corporations that these pro-Palestine protesters are boycotting.
Yeah, Jack, thank you very much for that. Look out, try not to get moused, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, Jack, thank you very, very much. Jack Carson there. It's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, what did you do to help the plight of Palestinian people? Well, I went into a McDonald's with a bucket load of mice and painted them in the colours of initially what many people thought was the Italian flag, but it turned out to actually be the Palestinian flag. So, brilliant. Yeah, well done, chaps. Lovely stuff. Anyway, GBNews' security editor Mark White joins us live now from Tel Aviv. Mark, thank you very much. Great to have you right at the top of the show. And Mark's going to be telling us a little bit about some of the issues that the police, of course, are facing on the streets of Britain here, but he's also going to be telling us about some of the latest when it comes to Brits potentially being blocked from exiting the Gaza Strip. Mark.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the problems that are being faced back in the UK, I think it was inevitable as the pictures continue to come out of Gaza, and they are horrific and disturbing. There is no doubt about it. It will trigger many people who are very concerned about what is unfolding there. And what you have, though, is those people who are concerned that want to turn out in the vast numbers that they did, obviously, over the weekend, with many, many thousands turning up in London for that protest. They are now being supplemented, if you like, by these activist groups. And these activist groups are bringing a sort of an organisation to what is happening, and that's why you're seeing direct action protests that are taking place around the country, and they will continue. They will find new targets. They've got McDonald's, they've got Starbucks. They will find others who they believe are being pro-Israel, and they will find themselves targets in the weeks and days ahead, obviously. And so it's going to be increasingly difficult, I think, for law enforcement across the UK to be able to respond to that in quick time. And many of the general public are going to be caught up in that. You saw in Liverpool Street last night many thousands of activists and protesters who then staged that sit-in in Liverpool Street. That's going to cause the same kind of disruptions that you see from the likes of Just Stop Oil.
No, absolutely. And we're going to be having a chat shortly anyway about whether or not the police have taken sides, whether it's fair to say that they have got a very difficult job, but especially when it comes to some of the things that we're seeing in Britain at the moment. But back where you are, or near where you are, anyway, Mark, Brits are in Gaza at the moment, and the Rafah crossing has opened, but we understand that maybe some of the Brits are not getting out. Is that right? What's going on?
Well, it's opened, but in a limited and controlled way. Both Israel and Egypt wanted real reassurances that security would be maintained, that you won't have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people spilling over the border into Egypt. From Egypt's point of view, Israel too want guarantees that aid coming in is not going to Hamas, and also that those going out are not Hamas terrorists. So it's been a long and a complicated process to get to this stage, but we are there now, and over the coming days there will be this controlled exit of foreign and dual national citizens. So 500 we're told today, including, we believe, a couple of British NGOs. Some other British nationals turned up at the border but realised their name's not on the list, and they will be called on another day. It's frustrating and of course frightening for them, still being stuck in the midst of all of this unfolding in Gaza, but the Foreign Office assures us that hopefully within the coming days all British nationals that want to leave will be able to leave. Elsewhere, further north in the Gaza Strip, Patrick, it's horrific what is unfolding. Lots of casualties. The IDF as well reporting today that 15 soldiers so far have been killed in the fighting. They expected it to be long and bloody, and that is indeed what is unfolding. And there's a lot of recriminations that are taking place about the strike on the Jabalia refugee camp. Well, the Israelis say they were actually targeting Hamas terrorists in and around that camp, using people in the camp as human shields, putting up underground tunnel entrances there, weapons storage facilities, and also headquarters for the Jabalia division of Hamas. They killed his commander, but a lot of collateral damage, obviously, with a very significant death toll from members of the public there, civilians caught up in this.
Mark, thank you very much. Mark White, our security editor, is in Tel Aviv for us. It's worth noting as well that Hamas official Ghazi Hamad has gone on television and said, "We will repeat the October 7th attack time and again until Israel is annihilated. We are victims. Everything we do is justified, and we have people ready to be martyrs." So I wonder whether or not that clears up for some people about the need to annihilate Hamas. But closer to home here now, we have seen police officers tearing down posters for missing Jewish children and other people as well, adults, Jewish adults. We've also seen not a lot being done about 100 or so more people sitting in and protesting in Liverpool Street Station in London. Liverpool Street Station is of particular significance, which I refuse to believe went unnoticed by the people who were doing this, was that it was the arrival site of the Kindertransport, which was a scene where a load of Jewish refugees came after the war. In fact, there's statues to that outside. Was that just a tone-deaf mistake, do we think, from some of these allegedly pro-Palestinian protesters and demonstrators? Or was that a deliberate location because of what it represented in terms of refuge for Jewish people? The police have said that when it came to taking down the posters, their representative went on and spoke about what went on in Manchester and said that they got that wrong. They responded to a call. OK, well, if you had a call from somebody saying, I'm offended by that particular poster, and you send police officers and those police officers take that down, what about some people in certain communities here who are offended by people holding up signs saying, I fully support Hamas, or they're driving through Jewish neighbourhoods with the Palestinian flag on it, and when you say you're offended about that, do the police turn up in the same way? I'm not sure. Former Royal Navy warfare officer Dr Chris Parry joins us now. Dr Chris, the police have an incredibly difficult job. There can be absolutely no doubt about that. Is it starting to look like they've taken sides, though?
OK, I'm going to speak as a citizen, not as a former naval officer, OK? I think the problem is that The police do have a difficult job, and I think they probably said, look, we need to de-escalate some of these big mob events because we could have more violence, we could have more offences being committed if we confronted it. So I think they've taken the line of least resistance. They've almost said that on social media. They said they're looking for offences, after the event rather than while it's taking place. And I'm afraid the message is going out that if you want to commit offences in this country, you go mob-handed. We've seen in the United States, if you go in a mob and shoplift, nobody stops you. And it seems to me that if you go in large numbers of people in a crowd, nobody's going to stop you committing offences which are against the law.
Yeah, how do you think, though, that people will feel when they see the police taking down posters and not doing much about people sitting in at a venue where the Kindertransport first came, where Jewish children and refugees were arriving and given safe refuge in this country? It is, well, frankly, to me, I find it hard to believe that they will behave the same way if things were the other way around.
Well, it's distasteful, and I think we're getting real two-tier policing here. The fact of life is, if you're taking down posters of people who are being held hostage by a terrorist organisation, then you are supporting the actions of that terrorist organisation by denying those hostages publicity. Similarly, at Liverpool Street Station, I was there last night. It was impossible to move across. I saw disabled people unable to get to their trains. Because of this performative narcissism by these people. And I think, as you saw with the mice, we've got everything going there. Cruelty against animals, disrupting the public, disrupting our infrastructure. And, we've got a country that needs to get back on its feet. We need to be productive. And we've got all these idle hands with nothing better to do than to mess up other people's lives.
It's feeding itself. This is the thing. And you're right, actually. Genuinely right to mention about the cruelty to animals side of it. I've been getting a lot of emails about this. Where are the animal rights groups? Yeah, I was kind of scoffing at it before, just purely because I find it ridiculous, right? It's not because I don't appreciate the gravity of the situation. I just find it ludicrous that someone would think, I'm going to release a bucket load of mice into a Mackey's. I mean, what's the point? Get a job. But the fact is that these mice are now actually genuinely, it's cruelty to animals. You hit the nail on the head, it's cruelty to animals as well. Look, Dr. Chris, thank you very much. I will talk to you again very soon on this. Dr. Chris Parry there, who's coming on to talk to us about the police response, or lack of in some situations. Still to come, an update on the High Court battle to stop asylum seekers being housed on the former RAF Scampton site. Have we got a breakthrough there? Find out shortly. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's News Channel.
We're here for the show.
More energy this time.
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's News Channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's News Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. It's 3:27. You're watching or listening to me, Patrick Christys, on GB News, whether it's on your telly, online or your radio. Now, still to come, a new report claims that police are failing to investigate hate speech against white people. And the King's state visit to Kenya. Was he right to express his deepest regrets for Britain's colonial past? Mixed reviews in the GB News inbox for that. I'll try and read a couple of those out shortly. But it's day 2 of a High Court hearing into government plans to house asylum seekers at former military airfields. So West Lindsey District Council argues that a decision to use land at RAF Scampton, where the famous dam busters were based during World War II, is unlawful. We're going to go to our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, who is at Scampton for us now. Will, thank you very much. OK, so what's going on where you are then?
Yes, well, where we are right now, this is the same place that protesters have been for the last 7 months, ever since Robert Jenrick, the immigrations minister, announced in the House of Commons that this was their answer for solving the problem with hotels. £8 million a day currently being spent on hotels to house asylum seekers. Instead, they want to use RAF Scampton and Wethersfield to house thousands of arrivals. I hope it's not as noisy down in the High Court in London as it is here at RAF Scampton. You've got the A15, a very busy road, but what you'll be able to hear in the background is lots of people showing their support. They're going to be pipping their horns, and you'll see in the background the people that have been here for the last few months waving their flags because they say they're not going anywhere, no matter what happens in the judicial review. What the argument is essentially from the councils is that they think the Home Office is breaking the law using something called Class Q in a wrong manner. The Class Q is essentially emergency measures that can be used for Crown land, which is government-owned land, which RAF Scampton and Wethersfield is. They say that it isn't an emergency, like the Home Office is saying that it is. The Home Office say that they're only going to be using this land for a short period of time, so it is an emergency. It's still a couple more hours until the end of the High Court's judicial review. We're going to hear a little bit more about what's been said in greater detail today, but it's worth reminding you of why these people take this so seriously. There is a couple of points that I've been hearing from people. One is that there is a £300 million regeneration on the table. That was in place just before it was announced that asylum seekers could be coming here to use the facilities for that instead. What essentially that is aerospace technology investment, the preservation of dambuster heritage for generations to come. The second thing that local people are raising is their concern for safety. Whether it's appropriate or not to feel concerned for safety, whether it's reasonable or not to feel concerned for safety when you've got asylum seekers moving in. I'm sure refugee charities would say that it is not reasonable. A lot of these people are coming from war-torn countries like Iraq and Syria, and we have an obligation to look after them. as I say, whether it's reasonable or unreasonable, the fear that these people feel is a very real feeling, and so that's why they're outside of the front gates protesting, because this is something that is playing on their minds, and right now it's changing their lives, Patrick.
Well, thank you very, very much. An issue that a lot of our viewers and listeners care deeply about, and we were there from the start with Scampton. We're not going to let that go. Will Hollis there for us from outside Scampton, and you can hear the tooting of the horns there, which I think does show you the level of support that they are getting. Just a couple of quick emails for you, gbviews at gbnews.com. Loads of people getting in touch about this mice protest that appears to be a new craze almost. Very cruel from these people, says Brian. He just doesn't understand why these people are doing it. He thinks that it is kind of a tacit support for Hamas. Obviously, I'm sure those people will say, well, it's just... Well, they might not, I don't know, but I'm sure they would say that it's just pro-Palestine, isn't it? And there is a distinction there. Yeah, lots of this coming on. Where is PETA, the animal rights group, when it comes to people lobbing a load of mice into fast food restaurants? I share your views entirely. Although PETA probably wouldn't agree with what is being served behind the counter of those fast food restaurants either, to be fair. gbviews at gbnews.com. Get those views coming in. Loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including more on the King's state visit to Kenya, where he's expressed deep regret for Britain's colonial past. And we will, of course, be giving you an update on the fundraiser for the Royal British Legion, the Poppy Appeal. So far, so many of you wonderful people have donated. We're up above £160,000 now. That's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody, for showing some love for our veterans. But right now, it's your headlines.
It's 3:34. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Buses carrying around 160 foreign passport holders set off from Gaza earlier, the first of an initial list of 500 people allowed out of the enclave. More than 80 injured people were also taken across the Rafah crossing in ambulances under a deal mediated by Qatar. It's unclear how long the border will remain open, but it's unlikely all those waiting will make it through today. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says UK teams are ready to assist British nationals as soon as they can leave. The world needs a referee to mediate how companies use emerging technologies. That's according to Elon Musk. The tech entrepreneur's one of the high-profile guests at the world's first summit on AI safety at Bletchley Park. The Prime Minister hopes to put the UK at the centre of global efforts to monitor the technology, as well as attract business investment. And a former top civil servant says Matt Hancock displayed nuclear levels of overconfidence in the early days of the pandemic. Helen McNamara was Deputy Cabinet Secretary in 2020 and 2021. She told the inquiry rules were routinely broken in the daily course of government and that Boris Johnson displayed a breezy confidence regarding the pandemic, which she found jarring. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2154 and €1.1514. The price of gold is £1,634.81 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,359 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, the King and Queen continue their 4-day state visit to Kenya today, which has been slightly overshadowed by calls for an apology for abuses committed during the British colonial rule. Now, this is his first state visit to a Commonwealth country as monarch, and King Charles said that he felt the greatest sorrow and deepest regret for atrocities suffered by Kenyans during their struggle for independence. But some are saying this doesn't amount to a full apology. I suppose technically it doesn't. I think there's the wider question, isn't there, about whether or not there should be a full apology. Yes, it's raging again, isn't it? Joining me now is our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Cameron, so look, a bit of a fallout on this then. What's going on?
Yeah, so there's a big difference between what the King said and what some people are calling for. So the King said sorrow very different to sorry.
Yes.
Now, as we understand it, the British government's stance on all of this is that a modern-day administration should not be legally liable for something committed by a British government 60-odd years ago. Now, it is true that around 90,000 Kenyans were either executed, tortured or maimed during the Mau Mau uprising of the 1950s. It's also true that 10 years ago, the British government did pay out nearly £20 million to around 5,000 Kenyans who were caught up in that atrocity. And as far as the British government's concerned, they've drawn a line under it, which is why we didn't see the King offer a full apology yesterday, but clearly there are some descendants of those victims who are really angry that the King hasn't done so.
Yeah, indeed. And it has definitely divided GB News viewers. I'll get to the inbox on this shortly, but just to summarise, a couple of people saying that they thought it was absolutely right for him to reference the mistakes of the past and try to, express some sorrow for that and try and, move things on, repair relations. A couple of other people saying, well, why are you apologising on my behalf, in a way? I don't really want that. But there is, I think, a more positive story out of this. Go on, take it away.
Well, absolutely. So this morning, it was a really lovely moment. The King and Queen visited the Commonwealth war graves. Of course, we're very close now to the 11th of November. You've done amazing work with the Royal British Legion, raising money for them. But Corporal Samueli, 117 years old, met the King this morning. We can see him there on our screens.
Hang on a minute. 117?
117. He fought in Burma. He fought in Egypt during World War II, and he had to throw away his military medals during the 1950s for fear that he would be attacked for being associated with Britain by his fellow Kenyans. But this morning, the King said he was amazing and personally gave back his medals. What a lovely story.
That is absolutely wonderful. I'm hoping we might be able to... Yeah, there we go. Exactly. And if you're listening to us on radio, that's the King there with Camilla. Give him a little pat on the hand. So he's presented him, what, with all of his medals, you were saying?
Yeah, so I think it was 2 or 3 particular medals which he lost and which he had to get rid of. There was a further 3 World War II veterans who the King also gave the medals to. So it's a really kind of full circle because, of course, it was the King's grandfather, George VI, who was the King during World War II, and it would have been him that would have been given the medals to all these veterans back in the 1940s.
Absolutely. I mean, that is an incredible touch. I think it's a very classy thing for the King to have done. Very well done, whoever advised him or pointed him in that direction in order to do that. And by the way, incredible for that chap as well. 117 years old. I mean, that is an achievement. And he must be... Is he the oldest man alive?
It's thoughts that he's the oldest man alive, but clearly records are all over the place in certain parts of the world, so you can't be 100% sure. But he's certainly one of the oldest World War II veterans to still be living.
That is remarkable. And you know what? A good, positive story, actually. A very good, positive story. So, Cameron, thank you for bringing us that. That's Cameron Walker there, GB News' royal correspondent. I'm going to delve into the inbox a little bit before I tell you what else I've got coming up. And, this mice protest has got you all going. Big time. GBviews at gbnews.com. Patrick, not only are these people breaking the law for a list of things quoted by Mr Parry, who was our guest earlier on. So these are the people that are walking into McDonald's venues, I think at least 3 of them now, and lobbing quite literally bucket loads of mice in there because they say that McDonald's supports Israel. He says they're also committing a traffic offence. Yes, I noticed this as well, by displaying a false number plate on their car. There's another clip which shows some of these people with a fake number plate, really, which has got the word Palestine written on it. So people, the GB News viewers, are desperately trying to get this lot nicked for one thing or another, which is interesting, isn't it? That's from Sue in Sandbach. Patrick, does these throwing of the mice not change the name of these people to activists? There you go. I suppose maybe they are. Where are the animal rights activists when it comes to this, though? I also want to know, seriously, have these people not got far too much time on their hands? If I was in some kind of WhatsApp group and someone was like, I feel very strongly about this, what shall we do about this? And then someone floats the idea of going to the effort to procure hundreds of mice, spray painting them the colour of the Palestinian flag, and then going to a McDonald's of all places and throwing them in there. I think at some point someone might say, you know what, get a life. But there we go. GBviews at gbnews.com. Keep those views coming in. Heck of a lot still to come for you, though, because I will be speaking about an issue which I think doesn't get enough attention. I think the issue is rising, even if it's slightly unfashionable to talk about in certain quarters. And it's the issue of anti-white hate crime, OK? So apparently there's a new report which claims that police are failing to investigate hate speech against white people. I mean, how serious a problem is this, really? Patrick Christys on GB News. We are Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. OK, now, welcome back. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. Look, coming up, we will be finding out about these severe weather warnings in place with our reporters who are out and about, and hopefully they've not been swept away by now. But police are failing to investigate cases of hate speech against white people, a report by a free market think tank has said. The study by the Institute of Economic Affairs said free speech was being stifled by a surge in the number of hate crime investigations. So, look, what's going on here? Here to pick through the noise is Head of Cultural Affairs at the Institute of Economic Affairs. It's Mark Glendenning. Mark, great to have you on the show. Thank you very much. Look, talk us through what's going on here then. So, police, are choosing not to investigate incidents of anti-white hate crime?
Yes, absolutely. So, for example, we had the Labour Party's former advisor on trans issues, a trans model called Munro Bergdorf, making overtly racist accusations against white people. Nothing happened about that. We've had an academic, Professor Gopal, at Cambridge, coming out with equally overtly racist, obscene comments. We've had a student union official Bahama staffer saying "kill all white men" hashtag.
So that happened?
Oh yes, absolutely. And the police took no action.
Right.
So what we're seeing is the police are adopting an incredibly selective approach to who they will go after, using this Orwellian concept of hate speech, which of course is undefined in law. So the police define it, following advice from the College of Policing, simply as exhibiting unfriendliness towards a group. But they're turning a blind eye to certain instances
by that
of it.
metric, you could actually apply that to football fans, in a way. Because, you know, if you've got Everton fans shouting things at Liverpool fans, you know, at what point do the police decide that's hate speech, for goodness sake? But from a much more serious perspective, I suppose it does tie in maybe to an idea that you can't really be racist to white people, maybe. And
you're absolutely right. And this is where, of course, critical race theory comes in, which is a racist doctrine that Black Lives Matter and other people have been advancing, which say exactly that. So, again, it's, you know, heads we win, tails you lose. Now, I believe, as a free speech fundamentalist, that we should all have the right to say whatever we want to say politically, and that we should just discard this sinister concept of hate speech. I think I should not be inhibited in what I say, and equally, I have no right to stop other people
expressing
their
views. But I suppose the problem with that is that potentially some people are more easily offended than others, and the police are more keen on policing their level of offence than they are about other groups of people, potentially.
Which, again, is a you know, if you go down that road, then you're actually saying that some citizens in our society should not be treated as individuals. They should be treated as part of groups, identity groups, and they should have more rights than people who are outside of that group. Now, that's a very dangerous path for a society to go down. It's going down the road of a kind of primitive tribalism. Surely we should be trying to move away from that, whereby we should be viewing each other simply as individuals, and it's irrelevant what colour skin we have, what religion we have, how tall we are, which football team we support, or so on and so forth. We should just view each other as individuals who have exactly the same rights in law and the same rights to participate in democracy. And you can't have a functioning liberal democracy if you don't have total freedom of speech to express whatever views you have about...
So your response to it, correct me if I'm wrong here, your response to it would not be to prosecute more people for anti-white hate speech, it would be to prosecute fewer people for all of it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Right. Free speech is a two-way street, and sometimes there will be things you don't like. I don't like these anti-white racist comments any more than I approve of anti-black racist comments or Islamophobic comments. I simply don't believe the state should have the capacity to tell us what we can say.
Yeah, I think, look, with what's going on at the moment as well, we've seen a rise in anti-Semitism. We've also seen a rise, excuse me, in Islamophobia. Keir Starmer, by the way, we're coming on to this later, has released an interesting video on Anti-Islamophobia Month. Apparently it's a month now that we are about to engage in, so we'll get stuck into that. But thank you very much. Tremendous to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Fascinating reading when it comes to that report, as well as Mark Glendenning there is the Head of Cultural Affairs at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Right, look, now to the weather, as large parts of Newry and County Down, Northern Ireland, have been swamped by floodwater as the city's canal burst its banks amid heavy rainfall. So dozens of businesses were engulfed in floods, widespread damage caused to buildings and furnishings as well. Meanwhile, people are protecting their homes and businesses. Roads have been closed, ferries cancelled as England as well as the Channel Islands prepare for Storm Ciaran, with the Met Office issuing yellow and amber warnings indicating the potential risk to life and property. Well, GBNews' South West of England reporter joins us now from Exmoor, and GBNews' Northern Ireland reporter, Jakey Beattie, joins us from Newry. Let's start with Doogie, shall we? Yeah, both of you. Good to see you both safe. So, Doogie, let's start with you. What's going on where you are?
Well, I'm in Newry, and you can see from behind me, streets are still very much flooded here. Businesses have been put under real pressure here when the Newry Canal, which is one of the oldest canals in the UK, merges with the Clanroy River, which is just down. So this street is basically where they merge, and both of them burst their banks at the same time, and this part of Newry called Sugar Island was underwater. Now, last night I wouldn't have been able to stand here. Today that is possible. Water is now subsiding, but there is further weather warnings in place. Banbridge, Kilkeel, Portadown are all, their rivers are under stress there. The Northern Ireland River Service are doing their very best to try and get that under control, and it has to be said they have done a good job at this moment in time. Nearly 12,000 sandbags have been shifted into the east of the province, and we are suspecting that tomorrow we may get a bit of a break here, but Friday we will probably get Storm Ciaran, that it will be hitting the south of England, hitting us, and on already sodden ground that could be a problem. Now, if anybody is out in amongst these floods, be very careful. Yesterday I saw a man swimming in this, and I can tell you, manholes blew here, sewage everywhere, toilets blew out through the place, and where I'm standing right now, the glour that is left in these streets, I can tell you there is such a reek of it, and we know that it's sewage. So if anybody's standing with their children and saying, oh, let's go and have a look at the damage, please, please don't, because, well, you could get all sorts of other problems that you really haven't gathered for. But now will become how much will be paid out, will their insurance be paid out to these businesses, and will government help these businesses try to get back to some sort of normality?
Yeah, gosh, I must say, Doogie, I do not envy standing there, it must be said. We can go now to Jeff Moody, who joins us from Exmoor. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, I do appear to be looking at a little bit of blue sky, not to diminish what might be about to come.
No, it's actually quite a nice autumn afternoon, actually. Lovely blue skies, fluffy clouds, and the sun setting serenely over the hills. It's really nice, but don't be fooled. It is coming. From around 6 o'clock this evening, that's when things start to build, and overnight, certainly by very early in the morning, the West Country, we're being told, will be very, very badly affected. The worst part of the UK to be affected, sorry, it's not actually the UK, but the worst part of our isles will be the Channel Islands. We're hearing that in Jersey, gusts will be up to 95 miles an hour, and the Met Office has issued a red alert there. We're hearing that people are putting sandbags outside their house, they're battening down their windows, they're being urged to stay inside, and we're hearing that some supermarkets on Jersey have been telling people, look, we've run out of food, stop stockpiling food. This is only going to last a couple of days, you don't need to go and buy your month's shopping right now. Well, here in the rest of the UK, we've got several flood warnings, in fact 24 flood warnings in place over the next few days. The yellow and amber warnings too, and that means potential risk to property and also potential risk to life too. Well, the RAC has said, look, try and stay home, try and work from home tomorrow if you possibly can. Certainly avoid rural roads and certainly avoid coastal roads. The coast is where it's going to be worst affected, particularly along the south coast of the country. As I say, starting off in the West Country and then sort of heading gradually east during the course of the day tomorrow. And the issue with rural roads is that we're expecting a lot of trees to come down. Now, it's obvious that trees come down when the winds are high, but it's particularly bad at the moment because the leaves are still on the trees, and there's been so much rain that the leaves are soaking wet. So it does mean that the trees at the moment are very heavy and they could topple very easily if there's a significant amount of wind. So we are expecting pretty substantial damage overnight and into the morning, and I will be reporting from North Devon throughout the day tomorrow to let you know how things are progressing.
Well, good luck. That's what I say, Jeff. Thank you very, very much. It's Jeff Moody there. out and about for us. Right, I've got a heck of a lot coming your way. We are going to be speaking to the Royal British Legion in the next hour as well, because you wonderful people have managed to raise a whopping £160,832 for their Poppy appeal. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. Great to see so many people out there. The patriotic majority, I'm calling them, showing their love for our veterans. We've got all that coming your way and much, much more as well, including the latest on the mice attacks at McDonald's, because apparently that's the way you show your support for Palestine these days. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon, it's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Lots to go at this hour. Have the police taken sides when it comes to the protests that we're seeing in our nation at the moment? We are seeing scenes like this. Bizarre, a new kind of craze appears to be gripping parts of Birmingham, which is getting a bucket load of mice and then throwing them into a McDonald's because supposedly McDonald's is supporting Israel. It is absolutely disgusting, this, from a variety of different fronts. An animal rights perspective to start with. We are seeing more and more of this kind of behaviour in different elements of behaviour as well. We're seeing people doing protests and sit-ins. The most notable yesterday was at Liverpool Street Station, which is where, by the way, Jewish refugees were brought to Britain after the war. Jewish children. There are statues outside to commemorate that. Why are the police not doing anything about this? Instead, they're tearing down posters of missing Jewish people as well. Manchester police said they got that wrong. They admit they got that wrong. Well, fine, but, you know, something else that the police had historically got wrong as well was this. The grooming gang issue. A grooming gang has now been caged for 70 years in Rochdale. So Charlie Peters, our investigative reporter, will be bringing you the very latest on the details there. But more uplifting news. Yes, that's right. Thank you, everybody, a million times over for raising more than £160,000 for the GB News Poppy appeal. We had a look around and we thought, look, maybe we can do a little bit more to help our veterans ahead of Memorial Day, Remembrance Day. So thank you very much, everybody. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. That's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. We'll be chatting to somebody from the Royal British Legion shortly who's going to tell us a bit about how that money might be spent. But talking of money being spent, I hope they spend it better than some of the councils, because there is another Labour council on the brink of going bust, this time in Leicester. Can Labour really be trusted with your money? Patrick Christys, GB News. This is Britain's News Channel. Get your emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. Heck of a lot to go out there. I will see you after your headlines.
Patrick, thank you very much and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Buses carrying around 320 foreign passport holders set off from Gaza earlier in the first in an initial list of 500 people allowed out of the enclave. It comes as more than 80 injured people were taken across the Rafah border crossing in ambulances under a deal mediated by Qatar. It's unclear how long the border will remain open, but it's unlikely all of those waiting will make it through today. James Cleverly says UK teams are ready to assist British nationals as soon as they can leave. The Israeli military says 15 of its soldiers have been killed during heavy fighting in its ground offensive into Gaza. That as another airstrike hit the Jabalia refugee camp in the north. Rescue efforts were underway this afternoon as paramedics dug through the rubble in a desperate search for survivors. The IDF says an airstrike yesterday killed a senior Hamas commander who was a ringleader of the attack on the 7th of October. In other news, the full spectrum of AI safety must be tackled, including bias and the spread of disinformation. That, according to the US Vice President. Kamala Harris announced the creation of the US AI Safety Institute, which will work alongside its UK counterpart. She said the threats posed by new technologies are profound.
It also has the potential to cause profound harm. From AI-enabled cyber attacks at a scale beyond anything we've seen before, to AI-formulated bioweapons that could endanger the lives of millions of people. These threats are often referred to as the existential threats of AI, because, of course, they could endanger the very existence of humanity.
A former top civil servant says Matt Hancock displayed nuclear levels of overconfidence in the early days of the pandemic. Helen McNamara was Deputy Cabinet Secretary in 2020 and 2021, played a key role in Britain's COVID response. She told the inquiry that rules were routinely broken in the daily course of government and that Boris Johnson displayed a breezy confidence regarding the pandemic, which she found jarring.
It was striking that something that I felt personally was obviously deeply worrying, that there was a sort of de facto assumption that we were going to be great without any of the hesitancy or questioning or that sort of behind closed doors bit of government, which isn't about saying everything's smashing and going brilliantly, but actually being a bit more reflective. The sort of unbelievably bullish, we're going to be great at everything approach is not a smart mentality to have inside a government meeting.
House prices increased by 0.9% in October, which experts say reflects the limited supply of properties on the market. Nationwide's market index showed an increase on last month's figures, though average prices across the UK are down 3.3% compared to last year. The Building Society says market activity remains weak, with the number of mortgages approved in September down 30%. Amber weather warnings are in place for the south coast of England and parts of Pembrokeshire in Wales as Storm Ciaran nears the UK. The Met Office says wind and rain could bring potential risk to life and property. A red wind warning has been issued by Jersey Met, with gusts of almost 100 miles per hour expected. Parts of Northern Ireland have already been flooded due to heavy rainfall. People have been warned not to travel. Our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie is in Newry in County Down.
The clean-up operation is somewhat delayed due to the overnight rainfall that is still keeping the Clanry River incredibly high. Many businesses still can't be accessed, and the smell of diesel fuel coming from the water is really quite strong. And with more rain forecast, it may be some time before the clean-up operation can begin and businesses can get back to normal.
And the King has called for action, partnership and commitment to combat environmental challenges as his state visit to Kenya continues. The King told the United Nations in Nairobi he's seen the effects of climate change firsthand before planting a tree to commemorate his visit. His Majesty then joined Queen Camilla on a visit to an elephant orphanage where the Queen fed a calf. The monarch also visited an urban forest to highlight the importance of green spaces in our cities. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
Well, our top story this hour is rising tensions on the streets of Britain because of obviously what's happening abroad with Israel and Hamas. Now, it's presenting a huge challenge for the police as protests, of course, are gripping the United Kingdom. We've now had a third mice attack, I can't believe I'm saying this either, on a McDonald's in Birmingham after a masked gang of pro-Palestine activists hurled rodents at the restaurant in protest at the fast food chain's alleged support for Israel. If you don't believe me, have a look and listen to this.
My days. Look at this. They've just dropped these off in McDonald's, all these rats in McDonald's. Oh my days.
There's a lot of rats.
I mean, to be fair, it is going to take a bucket load of mice, a lot more than that, to put me off eating a quarter pounder with cheese. But it followed a similar incident earlier this week where customers were left screaming in shock after what appears to be a pro-Palestine activist unleashing a horde of mice painted red, green and white and black as well into another Birmingham McDonald's. Now, last night, commuters at Liverpool Street Station were disrupted by a group of pro-Palestinian activists who staged a sit-in calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict. That station, for what it's worth, is the scene where Jewish refugees initially came to Britain after the Second World War. Now, meanwhile, Manchester Police has apologised after its officers removed Israel hostage posters, saying they'd got it wrong. I think there is more of a story about why they did that in the first place, to be honest with you. They had a few calls from people saying that they were offended by this, and then they acted on it. Well, do they act on everything that everyone's offended by? I don't think so. We can go live now to GB News' reporter Jack Carson, who joins us from the scene of one of the radical mice attacks that's taken place at the moment. And, Jack, you have yet to be attacked by a bucket load of mice. Not that I'm encouraging it, of course, although it would make fantastic telly. What's happening over there?
Yeah, good afternoon to you, Patrick. So this is the Small Heath McDonald's in Birmingham. It's the third McDonald's that was hit in these mice attacks. Last night, a group of protesters, pro-Palestine protesters in their masks, walked into the McDonald's with a box of mice with Palestine flags and shouting "Free Palestine." They walked up to the counter and then threw that box of mice over the counter at the staff that were working behind the counter, and of course then all over the floor before then running out.
Days.
in Birmingham. The first was over at the Star City Retail and Restaurant Complex. That's the one, of course, where this incident first went viral with those videos all over social media. Now, the West Midlands Police are investigating that incident specifically. They are saying that it is a public nuisance offence, and they are appealing for anybody with information about who, of course, the person might be that is responsible for those attacks. But these are all coming because of the pro-Palestine protesters, particularly within social media groups, particularly within the community. This is certainly not a nationally organised method of protest against, of course, this Israel-Hamas war. These are very much community-based protests, but this is because in Israel, the McDonald's franchise in Israel put out lots of statements on social media in the past few days, in the past weeks, saying that they'd given out 100,000 meals to IDF soldiers. They offered discounts to people who are involved within the security forces, up to 50% in some branches. So there's calls for that being boycotted, as well as, of course, other global chains such as Starbucks and Disney as well. And it's Starbucks that's been involved in the first attack on a Starbucks in Keighley in Bradford last night. That was vandals attacked window panes with hammers there in Keighley. They also attacked windows at the McDonald's there, and also similar to, of course, the mice, but now with stick insects, chucking those at staff and customers in that restaurant in McDonald's in Keighley. Now, the MP for Keighley, Robbie Moore, has come out in the past couple of hours and tweeted saying that he is sickened by last night's acts of vandalism, and he says the vile attempts to intimidate staff and customers were pathetic, cowardly and disgraceful acts. He also adds that these acts are completely counterproductive and an insult to all of those calling for peace in the Middle East. Now, he said that he had been in touch with the West Yorkshire Police in the past hour. They have released a statement saying after those incidents last night, they have arrested a man in his 20s in relation to one of those incidents, and the inquiries are ongoing with the Bradford District Police. The Chief Inspector of that force, Paul Wood, said that we are aware of videos circulating on social media, and they say these incidents are understandably distressing to those locally, but thankfully no one was injured during these incidents. So, of course, the vandalism is a step up from very much what's been going on in different parts of the country. Mainly, it seems, here in Birmingham. We know there was a protest in Bristol, but that was just taking place outside the McDonald's. Nobody actually went into that McDonald's. The mice has been an issue here in Birmingham, and now it seems in Keighley and Bradford, stick insects and also acts of vandalism.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Look, Jack, thank you very much. Jack Carson there is outside a McDonald's in Birmingham where people lobbed a load of mice into it to show their condemnation of the way that franchise has supported people on a different continent. The sheer effort that people have gone to procure a load of mice. I mean, Peter McDonald, not to be confused, of course, for the McDonald's franchise, has been in touch. Apart from the utter cruelty to the mice being spray-painted, where are they getting all the mice? I mean, it's a good question, Peter, isn't it? You know, that might raise a little bit of suspicion. Why do you want 1,000 mice? But there we go. Then they go and spray-paint them the colours of the Palestinian flag, and then they drive to a McDonald's, presumably in their spare time, although they might not work, and then lob them in there and then record the whole thing and show their friends. If one mate of mine sent me that video, I'd be like, you are just so sad. How tragic is that? What's the point of it all? There is no point of it. But there is a more sinister undertone to it, isn't there, as I'm about to discuss, which is when we piece everything together that's taking place at the moment, we have stuff like that, we have vandalism, we have police officers taking down posters of missing Jewish citizens in numerous different locations. I think because they're responding to phone calls from people saying that they are offended by them. If I called the police every time I was offended by something, by the way, you know, they'd never solve a single stabbing, were they? Which, of course, they're not doing in places like Greater Manchester or London anyway, so that ship has sailed. Then we've got people sitting in train stations, not just any train station, but the train station where Jewish refugees and Jewish children were brought during the war. There's a statue to that outside. That cannot be a coincidence, can it? We have people calling for jihad on the streets of Britain, Muslim armies, all of that stuff, the cenotaph being fenced off. Every single Saturday now is like Glastonbury for pro-Palestinians, and dare I say it, in some pockets as well. And I say this because someone literally had a sign saying, I fully support Hamas, people who support Hamas. And when you picture this, you piece all of this together, it does make you wonder, doesn't it, whether or not the police have taken a side here. Because this is now very much a national problem. a national problem. The editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simons, joins me now. He says that the Jewish community has been promised zero tolerance, but it hasn't been followed through on the streets. Do you feel as though the police have taken a side?
That's a big assertion, Patrick. I mean, certainly when I met with the Home Secretary and the Deputy Met Police Commissioner in the first week of this conflict, both of them assured me zero tolerance, using the same phrase. The Home Secretary, I think, cannot be blamed for this. The police are operationally independent from the Home Office, so I think it would be a mistake to lay this at her door. But certainly with regard to the police, they have made some arrests, but I do question some of the tolerance. Rather than zero tolerance, it seems like there's been quite a lot of tolerance flying around from the police when it comes to policing these demonstrations. We've seen a lot of expressions of support for Hamas, some of which have been met with arrest, but most of which, it seems to me, have not been. These protests have been organised by groups led by people, in many cases, with links themselves to Hamas. Many of them have met the Hamas leadership in the past. It seems to me that there's a strong argument for shutting down these protests. Look, I'm not one to ban protests on the whole, but there are other ways, surely, to support the Palestinians without calling for intifada, which is a campaign of suicide bombs, the like of which we've suffered in Manchester. Yeah. So it does feel, and the latest news about the police taking down those hostage pictures, many of the hostage pictures, up to half of them, have been ripped down by activists. These are pictures of babies, often women, children, old people, who've been snatched from their homes by a terrorist group which employs methods of brutality that are equal to ISIS and shares ideological origins with ISIS.
Can I ask you about...
right to take this down.
Yeah, what do you make of... So the police now have said that they were sorry and they got it wrong in Greater Manchester. So, as I understand it, people called the police and said, we're offended by these posters, and the police decided to then proactively come and take them down. Do you accept their apology?
Well, there are a lot of things that offend me, such as chanting for Hamas, and that happens to be illegal as well. And when people have reported that to the police, they've arrested some people, but not as many. But there's been a lot of that around. There's not that's not a question actually of offence. That's a question of criminality. And I think that if you look at the way in which the police officers have been conducting themselves in recent years, they've become more and more politicised. We saw them taking the knee for Black Lives Matter. We've seen them dancing at gay pride parades, painting their uniforms, their helmets, their police cars in rainbow colours, while burglary is another crime, some more serious than others, but all criminality, has been gone unsolved and often without police attention. And so the politicisation of the police and the sort of activism that the police have been showing in recent years does cause people to lose confidence, I think. And that's the context in which we look at these cops ripping down pictures of Jews who were taken hostage, and we wonder whether this is an extension of that kind of activism. Because let's face it, supporting the Palestinian cause, and which has bled into supporting the Hamas cause, actually in some cases, has become one of a suite of views on gender, on race, on colonialism, on slavery, on sexuality, that is held by many of the elites that run our country. And so it does seem of a piece with that.
Absolutely. And for a long time, I think people have backed themselves into a corner over this quite a while ago, actually, and now they don't feel like they can get out because they use the Palestinian flag as some kind of fashion statement. And then now you see Hamas running roughshod over Israel. One of the chiefs of Hamas, by the way, going on television yesterday and saying, we will repeat what we've done here. We will not stop doing this. It's our right to do it. And we're just going to line up a load of martyrs and send them in there and continue to do this. So, that is where they stand on it. The idea that Hamas is stopping anytime soon is for the birds. That's not going to happen. But I think people backed themselves into a corner when it came to the political situation regarding Israel and Palestine and Gaza, and now they can't get out of it. But when you piece together all of the different separate instances that are taking place right across the country, we go from Birmingham, we see issues in Manchester, we see issues in London, and this now culminates again yesterday in Liverpool Street Station, which is a massive arterial station in London, but also, crucially in this context, a context that I'm convinced was not missed by the people doing this sit-in at that railway station. It was the site of the Kindertransport, the arrival, which is when a lot of Jewish refugees arrived during World War II. In fact, there's statues commemorating that outside. Now, that, to me, is a couple of things. Massive undercurrent of anti-Semitism, and deliberately so, which should be stopped. There is also, surely, the crime there taking place of at least a public order offence. Where are the police on that?
Well, I agree with you on the police point. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that interview with the Hamas leader yesterday, because he did make the point very revealingly in that interview where he said, the problem is Israel. We are the victims here. You can't blame us for what we do. And it's that kind of victimhood that's claimed by Hamas to excuse the most medieval barbarity and savagery. And we see that reflected to some degree in the West, where victimhood is something people get behind, and it warps people's moral judgment. And we saw that in Liverpool Street with those pictures just showing there. That was organised by a feminist, ostensibly feminist group in defence of the Palestinians, which were represented most vividly by Hamas in raping women, killing them, mutilating their bodies. Now, to see feminists standing up for that sort of behaviour, they were chanting openly in support of the Intifada. That's not a Palestinian cause, that's a Hamas terrorist cause. To see feminists doing that just shows how this moral inversion can take hold of people when victimhood is the kind of planet around which everything else orbits in their world. And I think it's an outrageous state of affairs where the more progressive you get, the more likely you are to support jihadism.
Yeah, a massive. I do sometimes enjoy the old LGBTQ plus for Palestine banners that you see, and you just think, right, has anyone thought that through? But there we go. Jay, thank you very, very much. Ciaran is the editor of the Jewish Chronicle. Right, now still to come. There are reports that British people attempting to escape from Gaza have been turned away from the Rafah crossing. So we're going to be talking about all of that. We're also going to be discussing, of course, the GBNews Poppy appeal that is now managed to raise £161,500 thanks to you lovely lot. So thank you very, very much. It's justgiving.com/page/GBNews Poppy. I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Welcome back, 26 minutes past 4. You're watching or listening to me, Patrick Christys, on GB News on your TV, online or radio. A couple of bits and bobs coming your way in the next hour. A variety of different stories, it must be said. One of the ones is about a grooming gang in Rochdale, which has been caged now for a total of 70 years. Charlie Peters will have the very latest on that for you, our investigates reporter. And we're also going to be talking a bit about the Poppy Appeal as well. Very much a shift in tone there. The GB News Poppy Appeal, justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. An absolutely astonishing £161,500 raised in around 2 days by the wonderfully generous British public. So thank you very, very much for that. But in other news, Palestinian officials have said at least 320 foreign passport holders have now crossed the Rafah border into Egypt from Israel. It's the first batch of evacuations. But the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, posted on social media to say UK teams will be ready to help British nationals leave as soon as they are able to go, amid concerning reports that Brits have struggled to get out. GB News' security editor, Mark White, joins us now live from Tel Aviv. Mark, what's the news for Brits on the ground?
Well, that border is being opened in a controlled and limited way to allow... It was supposed to be about 500 foreign nationals out today. In the end, it seems, so far at least, 320 of those foreign nationals whose name was on the list have turned up to be let through the border. Now, even though the remaining 180 or so didn't cross the border today, their name is on the list, so at some point, if they turn out, we're told they will still be allowed to go through once the appropriate checks have taken place. And yes, there are reports that a number of British nationals turned up at the Rafah crossing into Egypt from Gaza today, but couldn't cross because their names weren't on the list. However, they have been told that clearly once their names are called, they'll be able to come forward and exit from Gaza at that point. The reason why this is a controlled and limited exercise is just around the security concerns. Egypt doesn't want hundreds of thousands of people spilling over its border from Gaza. The Israelis as well want to ensure that it's done in a slow and methodical way. They want to be able to ensure that everybody that comes through there is checked and that they are who they say they are. And to that end, border officials from a number of countries, including the UK, are there checking everybody, making sure, as I say, they are who they say they are and that they're okay, and then they will be helped out of the country.
Yeah, exactly. Look, Mark, thank you very, very much for all the latest reports there from Tel Aviv for us. Concerning stuff for Brits on the ground, hopefully they can get out as quickly as possible. But I do have a lot more coming your way this hour, including a gang of men has been jailed for more than 7 decades for child sexual exploitation in Rochdale. Charlie Peters will have the latest On that deeply disturbing case, so that is, of course, the latest grooming gang case out of Rochdale, and he's going to break down the sentences that they got as well and see whether or not we think that they actually are long enough. But right now, it is your latest headlines with Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you. It's 4:30. This is the latest. Buses carrying around 320 foreign passport holders set off from Gaza earlier, the first in an initial list of 500 people allowed out of the enclave. It comes as more than 80 injured people were taken across the Rafah border crossing in ambulances under a deal mediated by Qatar. It's unclear how long the border will remain open. The world needs a referee to mediate how companies use emerging technologies that, according to Elon Musk, the tech entrepreneur is one of the high-profile guests at the world's first summit on AI safety at Bletchley Park. The Prime Minister hopes to put the UK at the centre of global efforts to monitor the technology, as well as attract business investment. A former top civil servant says Matt Hancock displayed nuclear levels of overconfidence in the early days of the pandemic. Helen McNamara was Deputy Cabinet Secretary in 2020 and 2021. She told the inquiry rules were routinely broken in the daily course of government. For more on all of those stories, you can visit our website, gbnews.com.
OK, so 5 members of a Rochdale grooming gang who repeatedly attacked 2 young girls, quote, like pieces of meat, in a lair dubbed the Butcher's Flat 2 decades ago, have been jailed for more than 70 years. The victims, who are known only as Girl A and Girl B, were aged 13 and 14 when they were plied with alcohol, cannabis and ecstasy pills before being sexually assaulted for around 2 years by various men, either together or on their own. With us in the studio to explain all of this is GB News' investigations reporter. It's Charlie Peters. Charlie.
So the sentences are a total of 70 years. The lowest sentence, just 8 years just for one of the perpetrators of this horrific ordeal, and 20 years for the most serious offender. The surnames are Ghani twice, Hussein, Kazmi and Rhodes. Rhodes was from Blackpool, but the other men were from Rochdale. Now, the acts that they committed are horrifying. We can't repeat all of them on air, but it was a severe and lengthy period of abuse, almost daily, said one of the victims. For 6 years, the acts started in 2002 and were tracked until 2006 by the police. And they only got wind of this abuse in 2015, when Girl A was at a parental course run by Rochdale Borough Council and repeated what had happened to her when she was a schoolgirl. And the council heard this and passed it up to the police, who took action immediately and then got in contact with Girl B. But what I've heard this morning from campaigners in Rochdale, and indeed survivors we've been in touch with for well over a year in our work on the grooming gang scandal in this country, is that why did it take 8 years for this news to be reported in 2015, the abuse, and then for the trial and the sentencing to take place in 2023? Now, Maggie Oliver, the Greater Manchester Police whistleblower who exposed the scandal in Rochdale in 2012 when she resigned her post as a detective, said that it was inhumane to make victims wait that long for justice. Now, GMP have said that they did everything they could, and they thanked the victims for their engagement and dedication to this case at what must have been the most appalling experience.
For 8 years, people have been walking the streets accused of this stuff, waiting for a trial and to be sentenced.
It's an extremely long time to wait for this kind of justice to take place, especially as we know that in the early noughties, when much of this abuse was taking place in Rochdale, the police operation then failed. It was called Operation Augusta. It did not track the number of perpetrators as it needed to, and when it did find hundreds of suspected paedophiles on a file, we know that Greater Manchester Police did not follow up on those investigations. That's eventually why Maggie Oliver quit her role, to expose that failure. The new operation, particularly in South Manchester, Operation Green Jacket, has found hundreds of new victims since it was launched some years ago, and also has made over 40 arrests, and the 42nd arrest was made last month. So Greater Manchester Police is showing and is demonstrating they've got more of a grip on this problem than they did 2 decades ago, but that's stepping up from a very low bar. Some of the abuse that we heard, I mean, plied with alcohol and drugs, the standard affair that you see with this kind of appalling abuse. Girls met outside school gates, often still in their school uniform, and then taken to, as you described, the butcher's lair, which is a flat above a butcher's shop in Rochdale. But we also know that they were abused in cars, in public parks, in Saddleworth Moor, a barren open space in northwest Greater Manchester. And it's just relentless abuse. 6 years, one of the victims said, daily, where this kind of stuff was happening to her. And as I said, some of the detail we just can't repeat, but it is appalling.
Oh, it is absolutely shocking. I mean, massive, massive questions to be answered from the police down. I can't get over that length of time that it's taken them to actually face sentencing. And some of the sentences, I think, will raise eyebrows as well. So to be clear, it's a collective 70 years, right? But obviously the breakdown of that is maybe not as severe as that makes it sound.
Well, 4 of the men are in their 30s, their late 30s, so they were younger men when this abuse was taking place. And one of the abusers is 50 years of age. He's Mohammed Ghani. He actually had contact with his brother. One of his brothers is another member of this ring that's gone down. And that, I think, exposes the family links and the community-based aspect of this abuse, which in Rochdale often was perpetrated by members of the British Pakistani community, and that's reflected in this case as well. And we know that those people were operating in a ring for so long at this time. So their abuse was linked, they worked together, they facilitated this abuse. And this reflects a very disturbing wider trend, of course, across the country where so many of these other cases have been found. I mean, Maggie Oliver this morning, speaking about the sentencing, she actually said it's a relief that some proper sentences are finally happening. Because 8 years for one, 20 years for another, it is a step in the right direction, she said, because, as you know, Patrick, some of the sentences in the past have been pitiful, according to campaigners, in comparison to what we're seeing now.
Some people have spent longer trying to fight their deportation as a result of these crimes than they did spend in prison for their crimes.
That's correct. That's correct. And so some hope, actually, from this sentencing yesterday in Manchester, that there is more of an effort being taken by the authorities on this. So campaigners and survivors telling GB News this morning that even though the delay is inhumane, the action by Greater Manchester Police in tandem with Rochdale Borough Council and the CPS does show that lessons have been learned in lots of areas and they are working more effectively to deal with this problem. As you know, political correctness and classism and just total neglect towards victims was a key dampener of their efforts 2 decades ago.
Charlie, thank you. Charlie Peters there, our investigations reporter, bringing you that story. Again, it is, of course, a story, the kind of story that you don't tend to hear that much of on other news outlets. And I can't help but wonder why that is. But there's loads more on that story on our website, gbnews.com. It's the fastest-growing national news site in the country. It's got the best analysis, it's got big opinion, and all of the latest breaking news. But look, very much changing tone here now. Still to come, you have helped us raise more than £161,000. So the Royal British Legion will be finding out what the very latest amount of money is and what that money is going to be spent on. You can still donate. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. We're going to be talking to the Royal British Legion very, very shortly. Patrick Christys here on GB News. It's Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. Now, still to come, how 1 in 10 UK councils face bankruptcy. I think that's absolutely astonishing, isn't it? How on earth have we got into this position? Has your council tax gone down or up recently? I suspect it's the latter. What's it all being spent on? I know I want to know that. But, look, I've been raising a bit of money for the Royal British Legion. Well, you've been raising the money, really. I've just been shouting about it. And we've absolutely smashed our target. So currently, thanks to you wonderful people, we've raised more than £161,655, £161,665, I should say, for the charity. So thank you very much, everybody. But remember, it is vital that we, of course, remember the ultimate sacrifice our brave military heroes have made for our great nation and to support the veterans who need our help. You can go to justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. That's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. It's an astonishing amount of money. I really appreciate everybody who's given from £5 to £500 in some cases as well. It really does mean a heck of a lot, especially in the middle of a cost of living crisis. But I think we wanted to kind of know, didn't we, about some of the areas where this money may well be spent. And joining me now, I'm very pleased to say, is Director at the Poppy Appeal, it's Andy Taylor-White. Andy, thank you very much for joining us. It's great to have you on the show, and thank you very much for all of the work that you guys do throughout the year, not just at this time of year, to support our great veterans and their families and all of that. So where do you think this money might be spent? Some areas where this money might be spent?
Right, so, mate, firstly, Patrick, can I just thank you and all the GB News listeners and viewers as well for this. It's astonishing, I think, in 2 days, what you've raised, over 161,000. It's incredible. So the need is still very much there right now for veterans, both past and present. And to give you an idea, last year we launched emergency cost of living grants. The supply and the request for those grants has been exceptional. So we've had to use a lot more funds than we expected to support that. And you think that's absolutely what we should be doing, because that's what the Royal British Legion is there for.
for, and especially the poppy appeal this time of year. What I love is that the poppy shows people that you care. You care about that veteran community and what we support. So cost of living grants is one thing we do, but of course people will know the Royal British Legion. For over 100 years we've been helping people who've come back from conflict, who have both physical and mental help and support and needs, and that's very much still a case today. I'm a veteran myself. I know how important the Royal British Legion work is to the armed forces community today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so some of the aspects that you guys cover as well, you know, we've got housing, we've got mental health care, the support for the families as well, I believe, of the dead and wounded. And what are some of the things that you guys do when it comes to housing and all that side of things?
So we have a full care service team that really looks after people who are in trouble, either with homelessness or support, so we're immediately there for that. Right. But also it's kind of things to help people back from... we have a place called the Battle Back Centre, which really helps people kind of get literally back on their feet when they've been through either a traumatic case from conflict, or they're going through just a genuine hard time. And we're there for families as well, but we do a whole raft of things, from care homes. We actually have armed forces care homes as well. We have a number of those. And we did something amazing this year as well, that the Royal British Legion, we supported Team UK at the Invictus Games. Brilliant. So we took 59 veterans over there with their families, and you hear the stories from those individuals, and it kind of really warms your heart, and it brings us back to why I think the poppy appeal is so relevant, and why we're just so grateful for the amazing support from GBNews and what you've done in just 2 days.
Absolutely. Look, it's very worthwhile noting as well that the poppy appeal, you can go directly to that and donate as well. It's not just the Just Giving page that we've got here. You can go all year round, I'm assuming.
Absolutely, yeah. We need support all year round, but I think the poppy appeal is such an iconic time of year, isn't it? Remembrance is such an iconic time of year. And this year, actually, we've launched a brand new plastic-free poppy. Yes. And,
which I was going to say, I feel like I'm letting the side down a bit here, because I've just grabbed one from our poppy box over there, and we've not got the plastic-free one.
Well, so. Patrick, what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you something that we've just given to all our poppy appeal organisers. These are incredible volunteers that, with their set of volunteers, they go around and they raise money for us. So I'd like to give you one of the very first new plastic-free poppies that came off our production line, and they're serialised number with it as well. Oh, wow. So there you go. That's the brand new brand new for you as well. So it's just a little thank you for the amazing effort you've done in 2 days.
Thank you very, very much. I mean, this is lovely, isn't it? We should show that. I really do appreciate this. I will absolutely cherish this. I just do want to emphasise again that it is genuinely a gift to be able to have a platform like we've got here at GB News and with the viewers and everything, and it's nice to be able to use that platform for good causes, actually, and I can't think of a better one, really, than supporting our veterans. And I think the testament, Andy, really should go to you. I mean, this is obviously for all those people who've given, like, £5 when, you know, they're sending me the odd email saying, look, I don't have a huge amount of money at the moment, and here's £5, right the way through to people who can give £500 or whatever people can give. And I think, Andy, it just showed, doesn't it, that when called upon, the British public, you know, are very generous and can mobilise behind a cause that they feel so dearly about, like the poppy, like our veterans.
And I think we're all very proud of the poppy appeal and what it represents, what the poppy appeal represents from remembrance, but also kind of hope for peace as well. So it's such a special... I think it holds such a special place in society. We're so grateful, and especially at a time like now when cost of living is really challenged for a lot of people, that the donations they can give and that they can wear a poppy really kind of helps show that they care.
So, arguably the big day, I know, again, want to emphasise, do a huge amount of work all year round, but the big day's coming up, be not this Sunday, next Sunday, isn't it? What kind of things can we expect there?
Well, as you imagine, all this week. Tomorrow we have the London Poppy Day, so that's one of our biggest fundraising days, so we'll have lots of volunteers and armed forces personnel in London, in uniform, so people can come up, the public can come up and thank them for their service as well, which is amazing. And then all the way through to the Senate staff, and obviously that's, for us, is a very special weekend. So we have the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall, televised, and then, of course, we'll have the service itself on the day. And we're delighted that a whole series of veterans will march past the cenotaph, and there's always more coming, which is lovely. It kind of gives you that sense of what the poppy and what remembrance is all about.
Absolutely. Well, look, thank you very much for everything that you guys do all year round and helping so many people, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to raise anything at all for the Royal British Legion, for the poppy appeal. That is justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. We're going to run this to the end of the week, I think. OK, so we're on about £161,000 now. Goodness only knows how high that could go. So thank you a million times over, everybody. And thanks again, Andy. That's Andy Taylor-White there, who is the director at the Poppy appeal. Now, we're just moving on from that to round off the hour with another story for you, because it's not looking too good, unfortunately, for some British businesses as insolvencies reach their highest level since the 2009 financial crash. Now, this comes as local government leaders warn that 1 in 10 county councils also face bankruptcy. This is following on from Birmingham City Council's financial downfall earlier in the year. Joining me now is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Yeah, Liam, well, concerning times all round, really.
This is what happens, Patrick, when you raise interest rates 14 times in a row, which is what's happened since December 2021. That monetary tightening, those higher borrowing costs, they're really now squeezing not just mortgage holders, not just people with personal loans on their cars or appliances at home, but also businesses. Most business debt is variable rate rather than fixed rate. Let's have a look at some of these insolvency numbers. So an insolvency is obviously when a business goes bust. Between January and September 2023, this year, over 18,000 insolvencies in that 9-month period. And that is up 13% on the same period, Patrick, in 2022, a big increase. It's the highest number of insolvencies in a 9-month period since after the global financial crisis, the Lehman Brothers collapse in 2009. And it is because companies are suffering as borrowing costs go up, while demand for their products often goes down because households are being more cash-strapped. And as well as the idea of insolvency, you also have companies that are in critical distress. They haven't quite gone bust, but they're on the brink of going bust and they're kind of fighting for their lives. And between July and September, there were 37,000, almost 38,000 companies in critical distress. That's up over a quarter on the previous 3 months, so a real acceleration there. And 11,000 of those distressed companies are construction and property companies. They often take on lots of debts. They have to spend lots of money, and until you sell the house that you've built, you don't get any of their money back. And why are we highlighting this now? Not just because it's really important for a lot of Britain's small businesses, not just because behind each of those statistics is a family that's suffering, a business dream that's gone sour. It's because tomorrow at 12 noon, there's a lot on the news agenda, but this will be a big story. I'll be outside the Bank of England, you know, as long as they're not as long as it's not flooded in the city of London, weather allowing. I'll be in the studio if it's too bad to get out there, because the Bank of England is going to set interest rates. I personally think they're going to keep interest rates at 5.25%. A lot of savers won't like that. They want higher interest rates, but people with mortgages, people with personal loans, and a lot of those businesses struggling to survive, they'll want the Bank of England to keep rates on hold. Fingers and toes crossed, Patrick, that they do.
Now, I think we've just about got time as well. Another concerning thing for a lot of people is whether or not their local council's going to go bust and what that means for them. What's happening there?
What's happening here is councils also have a lot of debt and they're paying more on their debt service, but particularly is happening higher borrowing costs, mortgage costs are going up, landlords are putting rent up, and local councils, they spend a lot of money paying the rent of social tenants, people who would otherwise be in state council houses, housing association tenants and so on. And those rents are going up, and local authorities are legally obliged to make those rents, to fulfil those rents, to pay those rents for often at-risk and certainly low-income families. And that is causing a lot of strain across local councils who've already had a lot of their cash cut back over recent years. And this is what happens when interest rates rise. People like me go on about it in theory, but in practice it really, really hurts. This is what it takes to squeeze inflation out of the system. I personally think, and I've thought for a long time, several months now, Patrick, as we've discussed on your show, the Bank of England's gone far enough. They need to stop raising interest rates now and let this monetary tightening work through, bear down on inflation. So hopefully interest rates in this country at 5.25% have now peaked.
OK, right. Well, interesting stuff there, isn't it? Now, we've done a couple of highbrow topics, which, of course, leads me on to the very end of the hour, which is where I do a Patrick's Pick of the Day, normally, which is a little bit lighter, a little bit different, something you might have missed. Now,
cheers, guys.
If you're a male who uses your phone a lot, right, well, you might want to rethink how you spend your time, because a new study suggests that mobile phone usage can seriously impact your sperm count. So apparently the quality is slowly decreasing. Over the last 50 years, men who frequently use their phone could suffer 21% lower concentration of sperm than those who don't. The University of Geneva, so you know it's good, collected data from 2,000 men aged between 18 and 22, finding that stress, alcohol, poor diet and smoking can also have a negative impact on those swimmers. That's bad news for me because I do all of those, but there we go. Anyway, look, you guys stay tuned because I've got loads more coming your way, but I am just getting a quick call, so I'm just gonna take that. All right, okay, I'll see you in a sec. Right.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Storm Ciaran arrives overnight, bringing increasingly wet and windy weather to southern parts of the UK. Coastal areas most at risk of disruptive and damaging wind gusts. Some dangerous conditions around the south coast, in fact, into Thursday, but northern France and the Channel Islands seeing even worse conditions with 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts. Now, the wet weather sweeps in from the northwest overnight, with the winds increasing and peaking around southwest Wales, southwest England, especially parts of Cornwall and the Scilly Isles during the early hours of Thursday. Risk of 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts, or more than that in some exposed coastal parts. And that could cause some fairly extensive disruption first thing, as well as some damage to buildings and trees. Then the wet weather sweeps north into parts of northeast England, eastern Scotland. The strongest winds transfer along the Channel, so that by late morning, early afternoon, those winds are peaking around Kent, Sussex, parts of Essex. Again, 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts a possibility around exposed coasts. So amber warnings in force at the moment for some of these exposed coastal counties. Northwest Scotland, Northern Ireland just seeing a few showers, quite a keen breeze. And then into Friday, well, the worst of the conditions clear through. It's a blustery day still, but it's mainly showers and sunny spells, and similar conditions as we head into the weekend. A spell of rain followed by sunny spells and showers.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Good evening, it's 5 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Now, Keir Starmer has issued a plea ahead of Anti-Islamophobia Month. Let's hear it.
This Islamophobia Awareness Month comes at a deeply troubling time for Muslim communities across Britain.
We're going to play you the full clip of that and find out why he has been accused of shameless and divisive identity politics. In other news, I will be discussing, is the King too timid? OK, so King Charles, Queen Camilla, they've gone to Kenya, and he's saying he's not apologised for historic wrongs, but he absolutely has apologised for historic wrongs. Do you think that was the right thing to do? Are we now seeing the King going on international apology tours that, frankly, you don't want him to go on? Where do you stand on that? But hey, here's something that might not seem like much of a threat to you now, but people with much bigger brains than me keep telling us it is, so I'm assuming it is. AI, yeah. Is it a threat to us all? The great and the good from the world, including Twitter boss Elon Musk, are meeting at Bletchley Park, the scene of the code breakers, where they are discussing some of the concerns around AI. So we're also going to be discussing this as well, which is, yes, as you've been hearing, you wonderful, wonderful, very generous people have raised more than £164,000 now. It's gone up £4,000 in the last couple of minutes for our Poppy appeal. So it's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. We're going to try to raise as much money as we possibly can for the Royal British Legion and their Poppy appeal. Look, with everything going on in the country at the moment, with all of the scenes that we talk about on this show quite a lot, it's important, arguably more important than ever, to show some love for the people who are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for our nation and to have the patriotic majority showing their voice. That is, of course, justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. Thank you, everybody. Well done. That email address is gbviews@gbnews.com. I want to know whether or not you think the King was right to go and... He's saying he didn't apologise. He apologised, right? He might not have said the word sorry, but basically he did. Whether you think that was right and whether you want our King to be doing that stuff on the world stage, or once you apologise, well, does that then just lead to calls for reparations and money? gbviews@gbnews.com. But right now, it's the headlines.
Patrick, thank you. 2 minutes past 5. This is the latest. Buses carrying at least 320 foreign passport holders set off from Gaza earlier, the first in an initial list of 500 people allowed out of the enclave. It comes as more than 80 injured people were taken across the Rafah crossing in ambulances under a deal mediated by Qatar. It's unclear how long the border will remain open, but it's unlikely all of those waiting will make it through today. James Cleverly says UK teams are ready to assist British nationals as soon as they can leave. The Israeli military says 15 of its soldiers have been killed during heavy fighting in its ground offensive into Gaza. That as another airstrike hit the Jabalia refugee camp in the north of Gaza. Rescue efforts were underway this afternoon as paramedics dug through the rubble in a desperate search for survivors. The IDF says an airstrike yesterday killed a senior Hamas commander who was a ringleader of the attack on the 7th of October. In other news, the full spectrum of AI safety must be tackled, including bias and the spread of disinformation. That, according to the US Vice President. Kamala Harris announced the creation of the US AI Safety Institute, which will work alongside its UK counterpart. She said the threats posed by new technologies are profound.
It also has the potential to cause profound harm. From AI-enabled cyber attacks at a scale beyond anything we've seen before, to AI-formulated bioweapons that could endanger the lives of millions of people. These threats are often referred to as the existential threats of AI, because, of course, they could endanger the very existence of humanity.
A former top civil servant says former Health Secretary Matt Hancock displayed nuclear levels of overconfidence in the early days of the pandemic. Helen McNamara was Deputy Cabinet Secretary in 2020 and 2021. She played a key role in Britain's COVID response. She told the inquiry that rules were routinely broken in the daily course of government and that Boris Johnson displayed a breezy confidence regarding the pandemic, which she found jarring.
It was striking that something that I felt personally was obviously deeply worrying, that there was a sort of de facto assumption that we were going to be great without any of the hesitancy or questioning or that sort of behind closed doors bit of government, which isn't about saying everything's smashing and going brilliantly, but actually being a bit more reflective. The sort of unbelievably bullish, we're going to be great at everything approach is not a smart mentality to have inside a government meeting.
House prices increased by 0.9% in October, which experts say reflects the limited supply of properties on the market. Nationwide's market index showed an increase on last month's figures, though average prices across the UK are down 3.3% compared to last year. The Building Society says market activity remains weak, with the number of mortgages approved in September down 30%. Amber weather warnings are in place for the south coast of England and parts of Pembrokeshire and Wales as Storm Ciaran nears the UK. The Met Office says wind and rain could bring potential risk to life and property. A red wind warning has been issued by Jersey Met, with gusts of almost 100 miles per hour expected. Parts of Northern Ireland have already been flooded due to heavy rainfall and people have been warned not to travel. Our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has been in Newry in County Down.
The clean-up operation is somewhat delayed due to the overnight rainfall that is still keeping the Clanry River incredibly high. Many businesses still can't be accessed and the smell of diesel fuel coming from the water is really quite strong. And with more rain forecast, it may be some time before the clean-up operation can begin and businesses can get back to normal.
And finally, the King has called for action, partnership and commitment to combat environmental challenges as his state visit to Kenya continues. The King told the United Nations in Nairobi he's seen the effects of climate change firsthand before planting a tree to commemorate his visit. His Majesty then joined Queen Camilla on a visit to an elephant orphanage where the Queen fed a calf. The monarch also visited an urban forest to highlight the importance of green spaces in our cities. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
Well, very shortly, I'm going to be talking about whether or not our police have taken sides when it comes to the protests that have been taking place. You've had mice released into McDonald's restaurants, bizarrely. We are now seeing people vandalising things, doing sit-ins at train stations, etc., massively disrupting the peace, but also, I think, maybe displaying a fundamental undercurrent of racism in some of the things that they are doing. Are the police force taking sides? And when we consider that they're tearing down posters for missing Jews in some areas, what does that really say? But, meanwhile, the row in the Labour Party continues over whether the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, should call for a ceasefire over the Israel-Hamas conflict. Some MPs are calling for him to change his stance, and they are apparently increasingly saying that he needs to do that, otherwise they'll quit. But some of them are, of course, Muslim. In fact, quite a lot of the people who are certainly at local council level quitting the Labour Party are indeed members of the British Muslim community. And interestingly, he has put out an Islamophobia awareness video earlier today. To much controversy. Let's just have a look and a listen, shall we?
This Islamophobia Awareness Month comes at a deeply troubling time for Muslim communities across Britain. We've seen a devastating rise in Islamophobia, leaving people feeling fearful and unsafe in their own country. I've heard firsthand of women wearing hijab who are too scared to travel by public transport, of Muslim families being abused as they leave the mosque. Hate crimes are deeply damaging, both for every affected victim, but for communities. And we all bear a responsibility to do all we can to stamp out hate.
I can speak now to the founder of the Academy of Ideas, Baroness Claire Fox, who earlier accused Sir Keir Starmer of identity politics of the worst kind. Claire, what's going on for you there?
I'm at the art conference just at the end, and they're all celebrating. But when I saw that video, Patrick, I just sent a shudder down my spine in a way, because we're living in very dangerous, divisive times at the moment. Keir Starmer has, to his credit, not backed off under quite a lot of pressure in relation to the ceasefire, in relation to Israel and the Gaza. But we've also seen a dramatic and very visceral such Israel-Jewish state hatred that it's basically moved into anti-Jewish hatred. Really worrying suggestions of anti-Semitism being normalised, people, storming Jewish shops, tearing down posters of kidnapped Jewish children, really abusive slogans and so on and so forth. So just at the time when we're actually seeing genuine racism on the streets of the UK in relation to anti-Semitism, up pops Keir Starmer to say the big issue is a massive rise in Islamophobia. Now, obviously, this just comes over as cynical. It just comes over as the worst kind of identity politics, trying to kind of somehow keep in with Muslim voters. By the way, the majority of Muslim voters are not anti-Semites who are going along with this, by the way, but there's just something about that kind of like, I'll talk one day to the Muslim voters and say they're the victims of hate. Then maybe the next day I'll go and talk to the Jewish people and say they're the victims of hate. Then no doubt it'll be the trans community tomorrow. Then no doubt it'll be somebody else. I mean, this is not appealing to people beyond their ethnicity or their religion. It's not grown-up politics. It's cynical, and it's really turned my stomach.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, again, the cynic in me would suggest that it's not that long after he was, well, not quite turfed out of a mosque in Wales, but not that far off it, was he? And, we've got Labour councillors quitting, apparently. We had some issue, which thankfully appears to have been rectified by the Electoral Commission in relation to some kind of party of Islam, which I think would have mopped up a lot of votes when it came to the disenfranchised elements of the Muslim Labour community as well, and then up pops Keir Starmer. Look, he will say that he is just trying to do his bit to raise awareness for Islamophobia. I mean, the other side of this for me was, does Islamophobia awareness need a month, Claire?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right to suggest that this will be seen cynically by those people who are furious with him for sticking with his no ceasefire position. As it were, those activists from the Muslim community who disagree with him. But this idea that you can buy off the Muslim community by putting out this video, is insulting anyway. It's not going to keep anybody happy. But as you said, who knew there was a Islamophobia month, awareness month? There's a month for every kind of potential hatred now. And of course, it's just seen as almost like a PR marketing. But it was the words that he said, because he said, at a time when tensions are particularly high, when women are having their hijabs torn off, outside every mosque. But the truth is that anyone who's in the UK, that is not the mood at the moment. If you are going to be concerned about a particular attack of hatred against a particular community, you couldn't but notice that at the moment, at least, it's being aimed at Jewish people. That's what we know to be the case. And every news organisation is reporting that. I'm not just making it up. And the stats even say it. I don't think that these competition about who's having more hate crimes aimed at them is healthy in any respect whatsoever. But it seems to me that what Keir Starmer's done is, as I've said, is very opportunistically gone in there and thought, as I say, it insults Muslims by saying, oh, if I tell them I care about it when somebody attacks them, then actually maybe they'll, stop criticising me. By the way, we all know that Islamophobia is also a phrase that's been used to silence criticism of radical Islamism over recent years. I mean, that's one of the things which I've been told when I've criticised some of the demonstrations in relation to the more pro-Hamas elements on the demos. And by the way, I defend their right to demonstrate. I even defend their right to shout jihadi slogans. But I want to be able to call it out for what it is, which is that this is absolutely and entirely anti-Jewish rhetoric. But when that's going on, I think that it's incumbent upon us to be able to say that Keir Starmer should be actually calling for defence of and absolutely defence of those people who have been really attacked, rather than pretending that there's an Islamophobic war over there. Those of us who've said anything about the demonstrations are accused of Islamophobia and hating Muslims, which is an effective way of closing down free speech.
Claire, thank you very, very much. And always a pleasure to have you. And in your rightful place, leading us into an hour as well. As Claire Fox said, Baroness Claire Fox, the baddest baroness in the business, founder of the Academy of Ideas, reacting to Sir Keir Starmer's latest video. Now, to the rising tensions, of course, over the Israel-Hamas war in the Middle East. They're causing huge issues with the policing of protests here in the UK, which we've been talking about. Yet another attack in Birmingham. People, a massed gang of pro-Palestine activists hurling rodents on the floor of a McDonald's in protest at that restaurant's alleged support for Israel. So bear that in mind now, of course, as we enter anti-Islamophobia month. But anyway, here's some mice being chucked into a Mackey's.
My days. Look at this. They've just dropped these off in McDonald's, all these rats in McDonald's. Oh my days.
I mean, yeah, there we go. Right, it followed a similar incident earlier this week where customers were left screaming in shock after what appears to be a pro-Palestine activist unleashing another horde of mice, which they'd gone to the ridiculous effort of painting red, green and white. Until the mice that had been painted black turned up, people thought it was all about Italy. But that was at another Birmingham McDonald's, wasn't it? Well, last night, commuters at Liverpool Street Station were disrupted by a group protesting about the situation. They did a sit-in calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict. That's at Liverpool Street Station, which, in case you're wondering, yes, happened to be, just coincidentally, happened to be where Jewish children were dropped off in the kinder transport during the Second World War. Meanwhile, Manchester Police have apologised after its officers said that they received phone calls from people who were offended and then went and tore down posters about missing Jewish people taken hostage by Hamas. They've now said that they got it wrong. Well, GBNews' reporter Jack Carson has gone to a Birmingham McDonald's for us. He's been standing there all day. I hope that you managed to go inside and get yourself a non-mouse-infested quarter pounder or whatever your particular choice is there at Mackie D's. So that has been the scene of a rodent infestation, but a deliberate one.
Yeah, that's right, Patrick. This was the third McDonald's attacked yesterday here in Birmingham. This is Small Heath. There was also mice attacks in McDonald's in Perry Bar, just outside the city centre, and at the Star City restaurant and kind of leisure complex, the McDonald's there. That was the first initial attack. That was the one that's gone viral all over social media, and of course, and we know that the police were also, of course, investigating that. In the last 15 minutes, we have had an update from Birmingham Police. They have released images of two men wanted in connection with that incident. They want to speak to an Amir Khan, a 32-year-old, and 30-year-old Bilal Hussein over those incidents. They say that they've already executed a number of warrants in their determination to arrest the pair, who they suspect are involved in the unacceptable and distressing incidents. They also say Here at Small Heath, they are also investigating that similar incident. They don't currently believe at this moment in time for all these 3 incidents to be connected, but they do say that their position is clear, that these mice attacks are appalling, and they say they'll not be tolerated, that we will hunt down, Birmingham police say, and prosecute anyone who has committed such acts. Of course, it's not just here in Birmingham now that these attacks on what these pro-Palestine campaigners are calling pro-Israel establishments. Of course, McDonald's is one of the 3. Starbucks and Disney are also the other global corporations. In Keighley and Bradford, a Starbucks was vandalised with suspects hitting the windows there with a hammer. And the West Yorkshire Police in the last couple of hours have confirmed that they've arrested a man in his 20s over that incident. The MP for Keighley in Bradford, Robbie Moore, said that he was sickened by the acts of vandalism and intimidation. He says that those acts were completely counterproductive and an insult to all of those calling for peace in the Middle East. Now, initially these attacks on McDonald's have been because of reports out for McDonald's in Israel and that specific franchise, saying that they'd been supporting IDF soldiers and also security forces out there in Israel. But McDonald's, the corporation, say that they are dismayed by the disinformation regarding their position in response to the conflicts in the Middle East, and they say they are not funding or supporting any governments involved in the conflict.
Yeah, Jack, thank you very, very much. Jack Carson there, who's been given the long stand by us outside of McDonald's, which bizarrely has been the scene of a load of mice being lobbed into it, hasn't it? And I mean, I think we can all agree, given the incidents I rattled off before I went to Jack Carson, and then the incidents that Jack Carson has himself rattled off, I think we can all agree that Sir Keir Starmer's video there is incredibly well-timed and in tune with exactly what is going on in the nation. But GBNews' security editor Mark White joins us now from Tel Aviv. Mark, thank you. What's the latest where you are, especially in terms of Brits being able to get out of Gaza?
Well, we know that a couple of Brits NGOs were on the list today, 500 names on that list to get through the Rafah crossing into Egypt. But in the end, 335 people showed up and were allowed through, along with 76 people who were very seriously injured in the violence in Gaza, Palestinians who have been allowed through in a fleet of ambulances for treatment in Egypt. There's a field hospital that has been set up in the desert there to treat those individuals. And what we're told is that the remaining 170 or so people who are on the list today can still show up in the coming days, and they will be processed and allowed through that crossing. And the same for the remainder of those foreign nationals and dual national citizens, among them at least 200 who have been identified by the British government. There may be more in the way of British nationals in Gaza, but the UK government has been able to assess and identify just over 200, and they hopefully, according to the Foreign Secretary, should be able to get through if things hold and they have this limited number going through each day in this kind of methodical way.
Mark, thank you very much. Mark White there, our man in Tel Aviv, our security editor. Now you're watching or listening to GB News, and coming up in just a moment we will be discussing the King's visit to Kenya, where he's expressed deep regret for Britain's colonial past. Do you stand by that? Did you want the King to do that? This and much, much more to bring you in just a tick. Patrick Christys here on GB News. We are Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back, 5:26. You're watching or listening to me, Patrick Christys, on your TV, online or radio. Still to come between now and 5 p.m, 6 p.m. There you go. A reminder of our Poppy Appeal fundraising effort. You have donated more than £164,000. Thank you very, very much, everybody. That is justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. Massively appreciated every single penny of it. But, of course, as well, today was the second day of the King and Queen's 4-day state visit to Kenya, and the day has been an eventful one, from visiting war graves to an animal sanctuary. Queen Camilla visited Sheldrick Elephant Orphanage, where she also fed one of the baby elephants. I tell you what, that's like my perfect day, I think. This is King Charles, as well as his first state visit to a Commonwealth country as a monarch. At a state dinner yesterday, though, King Charles said that he felt the greatest sorrow and deepest regret for atrocities suffered by Kenyans during their struggle for independence. Now, some are saying this doesn't amount to a full apology. I mean, other people are saying it definitely does amount to a full apology because, I mean, it was really an apology, wasn't it? But they're concerned that the King is on some kind of international apology tour. Everywhere he goes now around the Commonwealth, that we're going to get a sorry. What does that mean for Britain? Should our envoy to the world be doing that? Do we have a lot to be sorry about? And, you know, what comes next after sorry? Sometimes there's, well, often there's calls for reparations, etc. With me now to pick through all of this is royal commentator Judita De Silva. Judita, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. OK, first things first, what do you make of the King's non-apology apology?
I think it's kind of what happens when when celebrities sit down with their legal advisors before doing a speech, when they say, take no accountability, but show recognition. It humanizes you, but leaves you with no liability. That's what it sounded like. But the history books have it with concrete evidence that what went down in Kenya in the Mau Mau uprising and fights for independence was abhorrent. It was inhumane and done under the agenda of colonialism for the British Empire. But then when you think to what King Charles is doing, why William Ruto, the president of Kenya, said it showed exemplary courage is for the first time, he's using dialogue that his mother never used. The kinds of adjectives, the kinds of recognition is something his mother never did. But also he's in a very unique position where he has inherited something that his mother never hid was the most precious thing she had, which was the preservation of the Commonwealth and the relationships therein. It would be the most profound indictment of his reign if he were to fumble the bag, for want of a better phrase. So he has to find a way to understand the ever-changing environment that is Kenya as it ushers in new generations that will not stop short of a full apology, but also preserve what was there before and the pride of the country that he represents. So don't envy him that he's juggling a lot of plates at the same time, but that is the job he's inherited.
I suppose there is a school of thought that says he's actually played a blinder there, because people can legitimately say, all right, he hasn't said sorry, both in a good way and a bad way. The people who want an apology may be palmed off a little bit by him showing some recognition, but those people who would hate the idea of our king going around the world and, quotes unquote, trashing Britain or whatever people want to say about it, then they are appeased as well. So, yeah, you think that he has got a very difficult job and he might be actually treading that tightrope quite well. What do you think, though, is going to happen going forward? I mean, everywhere he goes, is he going to now... He's set a precedent, hasn't he? He's got to say a version of these phrases everywhere.
Quite frankly, he does have to, and I applaud him for recognizing that he does have to. But what I think is interesting is that I'd like to see how it plays out in the coming years. Because let's say King Charles has a 10 to 15-year reign. What will he leave behind for William? Because remember, by the time William gets to the throne, my generation of Africans and Caribbeans will be the presidents and the prime ministers and the stakeholders in the global arena. And we come from a generation that are the voices now saying, if you refuse to even say sorry for what you did, it shows an arrogance that we have always ascribed to the British Empire, and you can't quite shake that. But I believe that King Charles is starting a nature of dialogue where he's showing I'm willing to have the conversation. And eventually that would come to a sorry, probably done in private quarters. So that leaves a landscape where William will actually be able to inherit a Commonwealth that is still standing. Because if he doesn't, the big warning is, by the time my generation takes over, they will see no necessity for the Commonwealth and will continue to develop.
I think the other side of it would be that you open the door then, you know, so you end up with more people calling for more and more and more. And I think it was just a couple of years ago, for example, the British government helped give £132 million to Kenya. So then when people talk about things like reparations, you know, people might have a look at the amount of money that Britain has given to a lot of Commonwealth countries over the years as well and say, well, is that not a reparation? The concern would be that you open the floodgates by showing any kind of recognition at all.
That is a concern, but what you have to understand is that the nature of a conversation will also dictate the possibility for the kind of reparations asked for. If you approach a conversation from a position of, I do apologize, I do recognize, let's talk in a way that is feasible, people will also come to the table and say, yes, I know that perhaps you cannot spend hundreds and hundreds of millions, but what can we do as two countries to help each other grow? So it may not be cash in the bank. It might be agreements. It could be trade understandings. There are so many possibilities to enable two nations to work together that doesn't just boil down to pounds and pence.
Juditha, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Juditha De Silva there, who's a royal commentator and regular here at GB News. Great stuff. Now, loads more still to come between now and 6 p.m. We will be discussing you and your generosity. Yes, we certainly will. As my poppy appeal has now reached more than £165,000. I cannot thank you enough. I know that our veterans and their families cannot thank you enough. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. We'll be talking more about this very shortly, but first it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you. The latest from the GB newsroom. Buses carrying around 320 foreign passport holders set off from Gaza earlier today, the first in an initial list of 500 people allowed to leave the enclave. It comes as more than 80 injured people were taken across the Rafah crossing in ambulances under a deal mediated by Qatar. It's unclear how long the border will remain open. The world needs a referee to mediate how companies use emerging technologies that, according to Elon Musk, the tech entrepreneur is one of the high-profile guests at the world's first summit on AI safety at Bletchley Park. The Prime Minister hopes to put the UK at the centre of global efforts to monitor the technology, as well as attract business investment. A former top civil servant says Matt Hancock displayed nuclear levels of overconfidence in the early days of the pandemic. Helen McNamara was Deputy Cabinet Secretary in 2020 and 2021. She told the inquiry rules were routinely broken in the daily course of government. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2117 and 1.1508 euros. The price of gold, £1,632.87 per ounce. And the FTSE 100s closed at 7,342 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
OK, I believe that we can just show you some pictures now, immediately, of Vice President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris, who has arrived at Downing Street. There we go. That Downing Street, shaking hands with our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, outside that famous black door. Now, Kamala Harris is primarily in town because of an AI summit that's taking place at Bletchley Park, which is the scene of the Enigma code breakers, isn't it? So she is also going to be discussing with Rishi Sunak, remembering the war, Remembrance Sunday, and remembering our dear veterans and the sacrifice that they made. That's Kamala Harris there at Downing Street, walking alongside Rishi Sunak. He is hosting the Vice President of the United States of America. So there we go. And that is in relation, as I was saying, to the AI summit. Well, there we go. Now, global leaders are calling to get a grip of AI. Elon Musk says that AI could pose an existential risk if it becomes anti-human, which I think should be quite a large concern to all of us humans. Now, tech experts, chief spies and global leaders have been attending this AI safety summit. It commenced today at Bletchley Park in Milton Keynes, and Rishi Sunak is hoping to put the UK at the centre of global efforts to monitor the technology, as well as attracting new business investment. So there we go. Now, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the campaign or the fundraising issue that we've got here at GB News in relation to the poppies, OK, and in relation to our veterans. So I just wanted to say this to you, really. I am always blown away by what a generous and caring nation we are. I've always known that it's the public that put the great into Great Britain, but that's been hammered home to me now more than ever, because the GB News Poppy Appeal has now reached more than £165,000 in just around 48 hours. Thank you a million times. Thank you. I want to say thank you to Frank and Barbara. They've chucked in 20 quid. They're ex-Royal Navy and ex-Royal Air Force. They wrote, "We believe if you look after your veterans, you look after your country." Pam and Nev gave 500 quid yesterday, which is unbelievably generous. I do hope that you didn't accidentally add a zero onto that by mistake when you were typing that figure in. I don't think we can do refunds, I'm afraid. Ronaldo, who gave 50 euros, said that this was a great way for Brits abroad to support a great cause. And yesterday, I was in Brighton, and I had a lovely lady come down to the pier to find me with her little Jack Russell dog to thrust £20 cash at me. John came and found me at the War Memorial in Brighton as well. He handed me a tenner. Don't worry, I donated that money online straight away before word goes around that I spent it all on booze and fags. But there have been a few people emailing me who I won't name, whose donations have really stuck with me. Now, one chap said that he really didn't have a lot of money, but was giving £5 anyway. And there were quite a few like that, all saying that they would give more if they could. Thank you to those people especially, because no doubt £5 for them could well be the equivalent to £500 or indeed £5,000 for some other people. And that really is incredibly generous. There are far too many people to mention by name, so unfortunately I can't do it. But we're going to keep this Poppy appeal running to the end of the week. And like I said, so far you've raised a staggering £165,000. And that is justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. Now, I've been very open about the reasons behind why I decided to do this. Our veterans community has always been something that I've cared about, but in recent times, I've felt more worked up about it than ever. The issue of not having enough housing stock to put a roof over their heads when we can easily find accommodation for everybody else, councils spending tens of millions of pounds on new houses, just not for veterans. The disgusting retrospective and historic prosecutions of elderly men for things that they have already been found not guilty of doing in the hot white flash of warfare decades ago, while members of the IRA receive letters of comfort and essentially immunity. That winds me up. But more recently, the cenotaph being barricaded up so people waving the flag of a foreign nation can relentlessly protest, demonstrate and shout about the implementation of an ideology that many of our servicemen and women died fighting against, certainly in more recent wars in the Middle East. That just does not sit well with me, and I suspect that doesn't sit well with many of you either, which is part of the reason the donations have skyrocketed. We hear all too often about the negatives of Britain's military history, but there is a silent patriotic majority out there, and that silent patriotic majority has found its voice with an appeal like this. Now, I hope that you keep your voice, because I think you're going to need it in the years to come. Thank you, everybody, for donating. I'm really excited to see how much we can raise by the end of this week. And thank you to our veterans, to the families of military men and women who support them, and to the Royal British Legion for the wonderful work they do. That link again, if you've got any spare cash, if you want to donate, you can go to justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. Well, very shortly, I'm going to be speaking to a shop owner whose shop displaying poppies was targeted in a shameless attack. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and this is Britain's News Channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Welcome back. Now, a poppy appeal display to commemorate Britain's war heroes has been targeted in a shameful attack in a leafy English town. J Printers owner Keith Campbell found his shop window damaged on Saturday morning as he claimed it would cost £1,000 to repair it. Oh, goodness me, there are some lowlifes out there, aren't there? I'm joined now by the owner of J Printers, Keith Campbell himself. Keith, thank you very much for coming on. So what happened then?
Okay. Sorry.
What happened?
Well, David Dunham, who's the poppy appeal man, we did a really nice window display with some of his items and mine, and we'd only done it for about 4 days, and I came back on the Saturday morning, and I thought someone had thrown paint to start with because I was across the road, and as I walked over, I could see someone had actually smashed it with a hammer.
Right. And, I mean, any indication about why they might have done that?
Well, on the display, there are 2 medals, a Victoria Cross and a George Medal and a Victoria Cross. And, but they're only copies. And I wondered whether it was to do with those, really.
OK, all right. And just tell me a little bit about the area that you're in, because, you know, it's not, I wouldn't have thought, a hotbed of anti-military feeling, is it? Or is it? I don't know.
No, I must admit, quite a lot of people came in and said how nice it looked prior to the window being damaged. So, yeah, it did look really nice. But sadly, once the window had been broken and they had to put safety film over it, you couldn't see it very well. So people were coming in saying how disgusted they were, and it had upset a lot of people.
And as the CCTV, I'm assuming not, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here now, but, I mean, is there CCTV or any way of catching these people?
Well, we got in touch with the police, but the police more or less opened and closed it, it seems to me. There is a camera outside Lloyd's, but the guy that was going to have a look at it wasn't there. He was on holiday, so I don't know the outcome of that. But yeah, I mean, it's just disgusting, just disrespectful for people who've laid down their lives. And you know, the display at the moment, you cannot see it properly, really. But David, the poppy RBL guy who did the display with me, without me knowing, put something on Facebook, and here we are. It's people's generosity has been quite amazing.
Yeah, and also I am. Go on.
Sorry, he felt really upset because I'd done it. I've been doing it every year and never had a problem. And I think the fact that I was trying to do it with him to help the Poppy appeal, and he'd put some of his items in there, I think he just felt really bad about it, that I would end up having to pay £1,000 in costs, effectively.
Right.
And obviously, he went ahead and, I didn't know, but started to raise money, and it's just been quite incredible.
So you now have raised a bit of money. I mean, look, obviously we're doing our fundraiser here for the Poppy Appeal, but we might as well get 2 fundraisers in for the price of 1, as it were. So what's your fundraiser then? How can people, if they're watching this now, how can they get everything fixed up where you are?
Well, to be honest, it's been so amazing. A guy the next day after seeing me on the television, he literally came in and was determined to pay for the window. Oh, right. And then the director of All the Glass rang me up Friday saying he wouldn't have charged me anyway. He'd been away and didn't know about it. So, and people have been coming in the shop giving me money, and I've been putting it straight in the Poppy box because they wanted to help me. It's really amazing. People's generosity.
And you know what? It's on one side, it's really disgusting and anger-inducing that people would look at something that's got, war medals there, war memorabilia, poppies to our fallen military heroes, and everything that symbolises in the run-up to Remembrance Day, and someone would take a hammer to that, quite literally. I mean, that's disgusting. But then you see the good bit, don't you? Which is that people come and they donate some money and they want to help you out, and you can get fixed, and you can get fixed quick, can't you? Look, why do you care so much, right? You've got a big poppy on your chest there now. You wanted to put a display in your window. Why does all this mean so much to you?
I think a lot of it is my grandfather fought in the First World War, and he served with the King's Royal Rifles. His name was William Campbell, and he got wounded, and I've actually got the bullet and the clips that held his stomach together, and it's just, I've just got so much respect for people who put their lives on the line in any of the forces, really. I'm not worthy.
Well, good on you, Keith, and thank you very, very much for coming on and saying all of that stuff. I know that will resonate with a huge amount of our viewers and our listeners. I just want to remind people as well that we've got an appeal here. I'll say goodbye to you, Keith. Thank you very much. Keith Campbell there, who is the owner of J Printers. I'm glad that everything seems to be sorted there. I just want to remind everybody of what we're doing here, which is a Poppy Appeal, helping out the Royal British Legion for their Poppy Appeal. And I started this on Monday, so I think it was about 11 a.m. on Monday. I was just sat in my front room and I decided I'll set up a Just Giving page, right? And initially, what I wanted to do was try to raise £10,000 because in Brighton, they had a long-standing poppy seller who sadly couldn't do it this year. And they were struggling to find a replacement for that poppy seller. And there in Brighton, last year, they'd raised 10 grand. So that was the amount of money I thought, well, look, let's go and see if we can raise 10 grand. Good, healthy amount of money for people. Let's try and do that, shall we? So set up the Just Giving page. Then I thought, I'll mention it on my show on Monday. I'll try and get the ball rolling. If we can get a couple of grand in the kitty, then we'll definitely hit that 10 grand when I do my show from Brighton yesterday, which I did. And thank you very much for everybody who tuned in and listened into that as well. So that link is justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. That's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. Well, what happened after that was nothing short of miraculous, and it is a testimony to the generosity and the patriotism of the British people. So far, you have raised £170,149, which is 1,701% of our anticipated and desired original target. So that's 170,149 quid. We were only supposed to raise 10 grand, and these are coming in now. Seconds ago, 30 quid has gone in. Sue has just chucked in 20 quid plus £5 gift aid. Thank you very much, Sue. Linda in Glasgow, 5 quid. I hope this helps. Eddie, 15 quid. These are all literally happening right now as we're talking. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. We're going to keep this running till the end of the week. So you will have until Friday to donate. If you've got the funds, that is, of course. I don't want you breaking the bank for it. I know there's a cost of living crisis out there. I mean, every little helps, so thank you very, very much. But don't put yourself... Make sure you can afford food. You know, we don't need you bankrupting yourselves for this. But it's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. You know, and you hear the stories there of people like Keith who have got, you know, a display of pride in Britain's military history, him saying himself there that he's not worthy. Well, none of us are worthy. The kind of freedoms that people use now around Britain to go and, you know, lob mice into a McDonald's to protest about something happening miles away, or, you know, sit in at a Liverpool Street station and offend a load of people, those kind of freedoms that people have are actually because people fought and died for those in a variety of different wars. So thank you very much, everybody, for, you know, standing up to be counted a little bit here. It is massively appreciated. We do love it. And it's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. That is very nearly it from me today. I'm going to hand over very shortly to Michelle Dewberry, who will be taking the reins with Jubes & Co for the next hour, followed by Nigel Farage, who I know feels very strongly about all of this stuff as well. Then you've got Jacob Rees-Mogg, and then I'll be back at it again this evening with a fabulous evening show lined up for you, 9 till 11 p.m. for GB News Tonight with some top-tier guests. Make sure you stay tuned for that. I'll see you in a little bit.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Storm Ciaran arrives overnight, bringing increasingly wet and windy weather to southern parts of the UK. Coastal areas most at risk of disruptive and damaging wind gusts. Some dangerous conditions around the south coast, in fact, into Thursday, but northern France and the Channel Islands seeing even worse conditions with 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts. Now, the wet weather sweeps in from the northwest overnight, with the winds increasing and peaking around southwest Wales, southwest England, especially parts of Cornwall and the Scilly Isles during the early hours of Thursday. Risk of 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts, or more than that in some exposed coastal parts. And that could cause some fairly extensive disruption first thing, as well as some damage to buildings and trees. Then the wet weather sweeps north into parts of northeast England, eastern Scotland. The strongest winds transfer along the Channel, so that by late morning, early afternoon, those winds are peaking around Kent, Sussex, parts of Essex. Again, 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts, a possibility around exposed coasts. So amber warnings in force at the moment for some of these exposed coastal counties. Northwest Scotland, Northern Ireland just seeing a few showers, quite a keen breeze. And then into Friday, well, the worst of the conditions clear through. It's a blustery day still, but it's mainly showers and sunny spells, and similar conditions as we head into the weekend. A spell of rain followed by sunny spells and showers.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.